Welcome to the Agoura Hills City Council meeting. This meeting is being conducted in person in the council chambers and also by utilizing video conferencing. Please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices and do not access Zoom during the live meeting as it will cause interference with our audiovisual system in the council chambers. Tonight's meeting may be viewed on the Zoom via the link on the agenda, by live stream on YouTube, by entering Agoura Hills City Council meeting in your browser and clicking on the link for August 23rd, 2023, or view the live or archive meeting on the city's website at agourahillscity.org and click on the Watch Meetings Online button. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. There will be an opportunity for the public to speak on any item listed on the agenda. Any person in the council chambers who wishes to speak or submit a written comment is requested to complete a comment card for each item and submit to the city clerk prior to the public comment portion of the item. Submitted at the meeting will be provided to the City Council for review and filed with the official record. For any person participating remotely, written public comments were requested to be emailed by 4 p.m. today and distributed to the City Council in advance of the meeting. To request to speak during public comment, please click on the Raise Hand button on the Zoom toolbar. Request to speak must be received prior to the mayor closing the public comment portion of the item. Public testimony for all speakers is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Written public comments will not be read aloud by the city clerk. For full details, please refer to the public participation section on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call the meeting to order. And for the Pledge of Allegiance, Council Member or Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Thank you. I will now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote. Good evening.
Councilmember Lopez?
Here.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Here.
Councilmember Wolf?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Present.
Mayor Anstead?
Here.
Mayor Anstead, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. No closed session was held tonight, so nothing to report out. We'll now move into the approval of the agenda. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Please state your names.
Councilmember Sylvester so moves.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber seconds the motion.
All right. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you very much. There are no presentations this evening. We'll move into Intergovernmental Special Purpose Committee and departmental reports. And the first thing up on the agenda is the great Raise Adobe Days update. I'll defer to Community Services for the update on Raise Adobe Days.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead, fellow council members. I bring to you a exciting, wonderful, jubilant update for our 19th annual Raise Adobe Days. Next slide. This year will be held the weekend of October 6th through the 8th, but we will start the week before on Thursday, September 28th, with our senior fiesta up at the Agoura Hills Recreation and Event Center, beginning at 11 o'clock for all of our seniors 50 plus. We'll then move to the weekend, starting on Friday, October 6th, will be our night at the Adobe event over at the Erase Adobe Historical Site. Catering, wine and beer, live entertainment, lots of good fellowship, so I hope everyone can join us for that. Moving to Saturday, October 7th, we will begin with our RAD Parade, which I'll get to more details on that in a second. Begins at 10 o'clock, straight down Reyes Adobe Road, beginning at the corner of Lakeland Arrow and Reyes Adobe. Once at the conclusion of the parade, we will start our Day in the Park activities. Lots of live entertainment, food trucks, local artisans, the beer garden, and lots of new activities that'll be happening this year. Sunday, October 8th, we'll begin with our RAD Ride, beginning at 9 o'clock. There are actually 3 different rides. We started it last year in commemoration of the 40th anniversary of the city. So there will be a 40-miler, a 40K, and a 4.0 for the family ride around Agoura Hills and the surrounding communities. We will then again have more Day in the Park fun beginning at 11 o'clock with more live entertainment. Again, some more food trucks, lots of Adobe tours, a beer garden, And that's how we will close out our 19th annual Reyes Adobe Days for 2023. Next slide. We have very special guests here with us tonight. I announced a couple of months ago, we are thrilled and honored to have Matt McKagan as our Grand Marshal. Today was actually his first day not having a first day of school in 33 years. We're very excited and honored that Matt is actually here with us, and I'd like to invite him to come up and say a few words.
Awesome.
Testing? Okay. So thank you for that nice introduction. What was that? I've used one a time or two. Yes, yes, yes. So I am thrilled and so excited to be the Grand Marshal this year. I'm so pleased that you invited me. And this is like a real capstone to my career. I've been in this community for almost 35 years. I started doing my student teaching at Agoura High School in 1989, and then I got the job teaching at Ladero in 1990, and it was such a great job for me, such a great gig that I never wanted to leave until now. So, but you're right. Today, it kind of when I woke up and Sarah, my daughter, and Rachel, my wife, they both got up early to go to school, and I didn't. So today was the first day it really kind of sunk in, you know. So not a bad feeling though. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to say that on Sunday, Nick gave me the opportunity to have an hour on the stage, on the main stage, from noon to 1. So I talked to two of my students. One is a freshman in high school now, the other is in 8th grade, and they are both incredibly talented. One is Jack Wright, and Jack Wright plays the guitar, he sings, and he's a songwriter. And he's amazing. And Cooper Poulos plays piano, and he's going to be in 8th grade. And both of these are superstars. Their names are going to be in lights when they get older. They are really, really great. So I'm really happy that they're going to be performing on the main stage from noon to 1 on that day. So should be a really great weekend. I'm really, really excited. Rachel, you've been practicing your parade wave, haven't you? Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So Matt will not only be in the parade, but he will also be around on the Friday night. I'm sure he'll be around Sunday watching his students perform. So come by, say hi to Matt, wish him well in the parade. We're really excited to have you. Next slide. We have a very robust and hardworking executive committee this year, and we have several of them with us. And I'm going to ask a couple of them to speak in just a minute, but I wanted to highlight a couple of them as we list through. We're led by our wonderful rad chair, Randy Paller, who is here on her birthday. She gave up birthday dinner to come see you guys. We also have a wonderful group, including Jennifer Johnson with Sirius Cycling, who's heading up the Rad Ride. Pete Lee from Tavern Tomoko, handling all the beer garden and a lot of the stuff for the night at the Adobe. Jody Regan is our wonderful resident that handles all of our volunteers. Amanda Poulos is helping with the parade and also just found out that her son will be playing on Sunday. Of course, Jeff Wachtel, our CERT chair, handling a lot of our public safety. Gemma Wildermuth will be Create Studio doing an art activity both Saturday and Sunday and Friday night, I believe. Jerry Wolf, wonderful resident, handling a lot of the stuff for the Day in the Park. And Ellen Wall will be helping with our Race Adobe Historical Site docents. So, like I said, I wanted to ask a couple of them just to come up and say a brief something, and I wanted to start with our chair, Randy Paller.
First, I just want to thank Matt for being our Grand Marshal this year. It is a thrill because I know my kids had you and all my friends' children have had you. So it's really a pleasure and an honor for you to be our Grand Marshal this year. So thank you very, very much. Also, this is my 19th year, and so I want to thank City Council for allowing me to be a volunteer for our city that I love so much and working with a fabulous, fabulous staff. And my committee is just fabulous. So again, thank you. Please come and see me, and looking forward to Reyes Adobe Days.
I would next like to invite Jennifer Johnson to come up.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, for Serious Cycling to be invited back again this year to continue getting everyone out on their bicycles and to the Rad Ride. As Nick mentioned, it's 3 different routes for different abilities. We are welcoming non-throttle e-bikes, so just to keep the competition level, and also want to make sure that families really know about that 4.0. 4 miles just around the city. It's well protected and lots of volunteers to make sure it's safe. Afterwards, we're adding on a Serious Cycling Prevelo balance bike park, which would be really fun for children to try out balance bikes, especially all of our little ones, in a protected area, and even have a little ramp for them to go over and have some fun and control the area and learn about riding as a new form of fitness. Thank you.
Jody Regan, she's handling all of our volunteers.
Hi. Well, I'm excited to be back as volunteer coordinator. I was the coordinator for the first 9 years of this event. Then I took 9 years off. And then Randy so some symmetry there, right? And then Randy asked me back, which I'm so excited that she did, so thank you. So I'm looking for volunteers. If you go to the website, raiseadobedays.org, there is a button up there that says volunteer. We're looking for middle school, high school, parents, members of the community. There's something for everyone, not necessarily just on the 7th and the 8th, but days leading up to it as well. So lots of fun things to do, variety, only a couple of hours, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We have a number of groups already signed up to help us: National Charity League, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Boys Charity League, Lindero Middle School's Boys and Girls Club is helping out, a National Honor Society from Oak Park High School, so we'd love to have more of you. So raiseadobedays.org is where you go to click the volunteer button. Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to invite Gemma Wildermuth from Create Studios to come up.
Hi there. Thank you for having me here tonight and to do a little shout out for Raise Adobe Days and maybe Randy's birthday also. Happy to be a part of Raise Adobe Days again this year. My kids were Lindero and Agoura kids, and I've been a member of the community for many years. We're going to be doing a lot of creating with recycled materials in the spirit of our Grand Marshal, making musical instruments. For the adults, we'll have crafty time too, so get your craftiness ready and join me on Friday night, and then we'll see you Saturday and Sunday all day for crafty projects and open-ended art. Thanks.
I really do mean it. This is a wonderful and very robust executive committee that we've never had a harder working bunch of folks. So I really thank you guys in advance for everything you have done and are about to do for the next month and a half. Gemma actually reminded me, one plus to having Matt McKagan as our Grand Marshal is he made our theme for the weekend really, really easy. Music at the Adobe. So thanks, Matt, appreciate it. Next slide. Of course, we have a handful of wonderful sponsors. We wanted to highlight just a couple of them really quick. Some local folks, Respect Martial Arts and Ladyface Candle Company will both be at the event both Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of the weekend. So stop by and say hi to them, and we thank you for your support, as well as some other folks which are listed on the website, which I'll get to in 1 second. Next slide. RaiseAdobeDays.org is your hub for all the information Raise Adobe Days. There is listed out activities by day. If you want to sign up for a night at the Adobe or for the Rad Ride or for volunteers, like Jody mentioned, all that information is on the RaiseAdobeDays.org site. It is constantly being updated with new and fresh information. Any road closure information, we'll have a list of local artisans that will be there. The entertainment schedule is listed on there. So all the information that you could possibly want is on RaiseAdobeDays.org. So we invite everyone to go there, check it out, keep checking it out because it is ever changing. And we invite you all to October 6th, 7th, and 8th over at Race Adobe Park. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick. I first want to just thank all the volunteers that are here today for the Raise Adobe Days. Thank you for caring about your community and getting involved. That's fantastic, and I look forward to seeing everybody there on Saturday and Sunday at the beginning of October. So, and Randy, I would sing you happy birthday, but it wouldn't sound very good. But I have nominated the city manager to sing, though. But happy birthday, Randy. Happy birthday. And from all of us. So thank
Chris,
you.
can I ask a question?
Yes, you sure can.
I have a quick question for you, Nick. Very excited about the different bicycle competitions that we're having. Were we going to have a rad run
Yes,
also?
we are still finalizing the details of that. But
Okay,
yes.
so is that going to be Saturday or Sunday? Do we know?
We're looking at Saturday, but again, just trying to finalize
Okay.
all the details, yes.
Okay, Saturday. Great. And I just have to say, I love that I know almost everyone that you have on that slide. Either we've been together at the schools or, Respect came out for our community service days. Dina DeFalco, I went to high school with, like all of of Ladyface Candle. So it's such an amazing hometown event. I love it. You may remember that when we were interviewing for city council appointments, one of the questions was, what do you love most about Agoura Hills? And almost everyone said Reyes Adobe Days. So excited for this, and thank you all for coming tonight. And let us know about the Rad Run, too.
I will.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other reports from staff? No? All right. Are there any reports from City Council? Awesome. We'll move into public comments. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items not listed on the agenda that are under the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. For council chamber attendees, please submit a public comment card to the city clerk. For Zoom attendees, please click the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Persons addressing the council shall not engage in disorderly conduct that disrupts or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. We did not receive any written public comments. We do have one speaker card. Ben Suber.
All righty. Good evening, Mayor Anstead and City Council and City Manager Hamburger and staff. Ben Suber, Agoura Hills resident, and I live right along the Medea Creek. And speaking of the Medea Creek, it is that time of year coming up here, but I also just realized this is the last City Council member before that time of year, and that time of the year is going to come on September 9th. And what, you may ask, am I talking about? The creek cleanup. Yes, the 9th annual creek cleanup will be taking place on not Saturday, because I won't be there, but a couple of Saturdays from now on September 9th at the southwest corner of Canaan and Agoura from, 9 to noon. I almost blanked out on time because I am so excited. But anyway, it did, once again, just like with Community Service Days back on May 7th, it rained again, rather hard too. And when it rains, the trash gets picked up, and I should know because there are 6 bottles on the banks of the Medea Creek right by where I live that I'm going to go clean up soon. But if that's bad enough where I live, then it's got to be worse. But as of right now, we've got, as of this very moment, 6:18 in the evening, we only have 34 volunteers, and I know we can do better. We got 3 more weeks to get volunteers, so Agoura Hills, we want you to help us out. Sign up online, and at Concert in the Park, I will have this flyer with me. I will personally help you sign up if you are interested. But don't forget, even if you're interested, don't forget to go into that Sign Up Genius link and sign up now. And on that fun note, I am so excited to see everybody out at Canaan and Agoura on September 9th. We've got a lot of cleanup to do, and let's go have some fun, shall we? Thank you very much again, and chapeau to the RAD committee, too, for being such a great influence on volunteering. So on that note, cheers.
Cheers. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you.
We have no further speaker cards. However, we'll defer to staff to see if there's any remote participants. Amber?
Good evening, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. We'll now move to the consent calendar. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items on the consent calendar. For council chamber attendees, please submit a public comment card to the city clerk. For Zoom attendees, please click the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you. No written public comments have been received. No speaker cards have been submitted. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participants.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the city council on the consent calendar? Okay. I will now call for a motion and a second to adopt the consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
This is Deborah Klein Lopez. I'll move to adopt the consent calendar.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber seconds the motion.
Thank you. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into the public hearing section. Our next item is a public hearing to consider ordinance number 23-472 to amend provisions of the sign ordinance and making a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. I will now open the public hearing and defer to the Community Development Director, Denise Thomas.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, council members. We are bringing to you this evening Phase 2 of the sign and lighting ordinance that we've been working on for many years. As you may recall, years ago we did Phase 1. Phase 1 was centered on basically dealing with content neutral material, and now our consultant is ready to present to you Phase 2. With that, I will give you Joyce Bozelinski, Parker Bozelinski. She's going to be doing the presentation. We also have our consultant from Kimley Horn available should you have questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Denise. Mayor, members of the City Council, good evening. As Denise indicated, the item before you tonight is consideration of Phase 2 of the sign code update. Next slide. By way of background, in October 23 of 2019 is when the City Council adopted the ordinance for Phase 1. On October 27, 2021 and February 16, 2023, the City Council's Land Use and Economic Development Subcommittee met and discussed Phase 2 with a focus on the public participation process, sign lighting, and the review process for sign modifications. In March and April, the public participation process started, and staff developed a sign code survey, and there was outreach to both residents and businesses through social media, the city's webpage, city emails, and then the chamber emailed the local businesses in the community. And then on April the 5th, city staff and a chamber representative held a joint sidewalk survey event, and that was at the Wizens Mall. And then July 30th, 2023, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on Phase 2, and with a 4-0 vote with one member absent, recommended that the City Council adopt the draft ordinance you have before you tonight. Next slide. The purpose of each of these phases, Phase 1 focused on updating the code for legal and technical issues related to content neutrality. There are also some miscellaneous administrative revisions and a reformatting of the entire code. Phase 2, which is before you tonight, is a review of the sign ordinance pertaining to sign standards, consideration of revisions pertaining to the approval process for modifications, and revisions to improve legibility and ease of use. Next slide. These sign code amendments are a snapshot of what is in your staff report, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. I'll just touch on what they are. They're described in your staff report. But it included update and moving the sign definitions to Chapter 1, which is the zoning ordinance definition section, updating criteria for monument signs when a business is located on a corner lot, increasing the size of directional signs, service station signs, revising the number and type so that it's consistent with other businesses, in addition to the price signs that are required by state and federal law. The other thing to note here is the use of white bulbs. This is something that staff has been requesting for gas station price signs. The use of white bulbs is not quite as intrusive and is more rural as opposed to colored bulbs. So that has been a request of volunteer up until this date, and so with this ordinance, we would codify that requirement. The sign program section was updated. The reference to Old Agoura sign standards were added to the code. Mylar and metallic balloons were prohibited. And the two more substantial issues, which was adding the sign lighting standards and revising the review and approval process, is what the rest of my presentation will focus on. Next slide. For sign lighting, there were two questions in the survey. The city asked whether the city should regulate sign lighting, sign brightness, and 49.3% of the residents said yes. 24.5 were no. Those were all business owners. And the neutral was 26.58, and those were the property managers. We provided this breakdown here because we were unable to address a question with the Planning Commission asked relative to this, and so that's why we provided this breakdown tonight. So you would have the percentages of residents versus business owners versus property managers. The other question was which multi-tenant centers have appropriate sign lighting, and that was Twin Oaks and the Wizens Market Square. In order to develop standards for regulating sign lighting, the city hired Kimley Horn as a lighting consultant. And as Denise indicated, we do have a representative via Zoom to answer any questions the council may have. They recommended 3 standards, and I'll just touch on them briefly here and go into more detail in the next couple of slides. They would be divided by externally and internally illuminated signs. And for externally illuminated signs, it would be measured by the bug system. And again, I'll explain what that is in the next slide. For both external and internally illuminated, we would use color temperature, and that is measured in kelvins. And then in brightness, that would be for internally illuminated signs, and that would be measured in candelas per meter square. Next slide. This is the first rating for the externally illuminated signs. So B represents the backlight. That's the dark blue on the exhibit. It's anything that goes behind the sign. U represents the uplight. That would be anything above the horizontal plane of the sign. G stands for glare, which is the more purple or light blue color. And that addresses the glare that is projected off the sign. The recommendation is for a bug rating of U of 0, U equals 0. That would mean that no stray light is cast upward, and adopting this standard would be consistent with dark skies ordinance. That is a requirement. Dark skies requires shielding and other lights on light poles, and they utilize this bug rating of 0. Next slide. The next standard would be color temperatures, and color temperature is measured by kelvins, and color temperature is measured by the color of the light. So on the exhibit to the right is the blue cool light. It's considered cool light. On the left of this exhibit is the yellow-red, and that's the warm colors. The recommendation is 3,000 for the externally illuminated signs, and so that would be in conjunction with the bug rating for externally illuminated signs. They would be required to comply with both the bug and the color temperature. For internally illuminated signs, this would be a range between 3,000 and 5,000. So a halo light is considered an internally illuminated sign. Staff is recommending a 3,000 maximum for halo lit signs. But for the channel letter signs, which is the other type of internally illuminated signs, they could be from 3,000 to 5,000. In order to help the City Council visualize what that might mean, the Twin Oaks Center, where Ralph's is 3,500 kelvins. And the Agoura Meadows, where Vaughn's is, that was approved at 5,000 kelvins. So it'll give you a visual of what those color temperatures represent. This was another question that was asked in the survey, and the survey results were just over 59% selected the numbers anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000, so that's an average. Next slide. The next standard is sign brightness, and sign brightness is measured through luminance, which is the light that projects off the face of the sign, and that's demonstrated in the exhibit on the left, and illuminance, which is the sign or the light that hits on the property line or on the surface. City already has standards for foot candles at the property line, and so staff is only addressing sign luminance standards. Next slide. For the brightness and the luminance, Kimley Horn is recommending measuring it different than is typically measured. And this would be good for the city as it will eliminate the overly bright signs. The maximum luminance suggested is 700 CD meter square. That basically means candela meter square. So the luminance is measured in candelas. Kimley Horn is recommending that that standard applies to all portions of the sign. The United States Sign Council Foundation is a nonprofit that develops standards for sign companies. It's how they develop uniform standards that all sign companies can use. They use a mean weighted luminance of 700 candelas per meter square, but they measure the surface area and the brightness of each color and then average that. And on the next slide, I will have a demonstration of what that results in compared to the recommendation from Kimley Horn. Luminance would be measured using a light meter. So if the City Council were to adopt this standard, a light meter would be needed to determine whether a sign was overly bright if the staff got a complaint. The industry standard is the Kanokam Minolta LS150, and that ranges in price from $4,000 to $6,000 based on the features and the warranties. And the equipment would need to be calibrated regularly to make accurate readings in order to be used for code enforcement. Next slide. This is an example of measuring the 700 candelas meter square. On the left is a pretty common sign. That is measured by assigning a candela to each color. So the red has a candela, the white has a candela, and then the background has no candela because there's no light projecting. It's then averaged based on the percentage of the sign area and to develop a weighted mean luminance. And in this case, it's 63.47, which is fairly low. And so this standard that we are recommending of the 700 candelas meter square should only be seen as a standard to prevent overly bright signs. It may not reduce, we have no way of knowing what your existing signs would measure. But if the sign on the left is only barely 64, it would probably just be used for the overly bright signs. And the overly bright sign is demonstrated on the right. So that sign actually has 870 candelas. White generally has the most candelas, but when you average in the background, the black color, and average it like the sign industry does, you would come up with only a little over 300 and, I think it was 29 candelas, whereas recommended by Kimberly Horn and staff, no portion of the sign could be over 700. So if somebody approached the city with a sign like that, they would have to reduce the brightness of the entire sign or the white part of the sign from 870 to 700. So that's why this is recommended as a better alternative than what is typically used. Next slide. These next couple of slides just covers the review and approval process. And so the first couple of items, or the first item is not changing in terms of what the director currently has authority to for minor modifications. The second item, this is the reduction of landscaping at the base of a monument sign, has no standard. It has no upper limit. And the proposed, again, it remains the same for the minor mods for the building site area and stuff. Nothing changes there. But staff is recommending adopting an upper limit for reducing landscaping around the monument sign of 30%. Anything above that would require a variance at the Planning Commission. The other thing staff is recommending is that this allowance be only used for existing centers that have some constraints like an existing parking lot or a building or something but that would prevent them providing the required landscaping. If it was a newly built center, then they would have to ask for that request by going to the Planning Commission as a variance or part of a sign program. The main change is currently all sign modifications are considered by the Planning Commission with a notice and a public hearing. The recommendation is for the size and height of the sign, a modification, it be moved to the planning director's review and approval process. And there would be two levels of review. Up to 10% reduction in the size and height would be an administrative approval, and there would be no notification and no hearing. Above 10%, 11% to 30%, that would be noticed, but there would be no hearing. Next slide. This slide shows the Planning Commission, and so again, everything that the Planning Commission currently has authority is on top. Most of that will not change. Sign program stays. The change is, again, with the sign modifications. Right now, the Planning Commission has the review authority for all sign modifications, and there are 4 types that are listed in the code. That's the sign height, the sign size, the location of signs, and the number of signs. And they're all minor modifications considered by the Planning Commission. There is notification and a public hearing. The proposal is, again, to leave the sign program and the criteria, the second one with the criteria of entering into a landscape maintenance agreement. Nothing would change there. What would change is that, again, the sign modifications for size and height would move to the planning director. And then the location and number of signs would no longer be a sign modification, but it would be considered by the Planning Commission through the variance process. Next slide. In summary, the sign code has been revised to improve legibility and ease of use. Sign standards and processing procedures have been updated, and proposed revisions are presented in the draft ordinance that the City Council received as attachment 2, and a red line was provided is in the staff report as attachment 3. Next slide. With that, staff is recommending staff respectfully recommends that the City Council conduct a public hearing, waive full reading, and introduce Ordinance 23-472, amending Article 9, zoning of the Agoura Hills Municipal Code to modify regulations pertaining to signs and the review and approval authority for modifications, and making a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. That concludes staff's presentation. I am available for questions, as is staff. And again, there is a representative from Kimberly Horn who is also available for questions.
Thank you. Before we move on to public comment, does any council member have questions of the staff presentation? Councilmember Lopez.
Hi, nice to see you. Councilmember Wolf and I are on the subcommittee that has been through this a couple times, but there was one thing on here that I don't remember, and I apologize if we did go over it, because sign ordinances are complicated. There's a lot of science behind this. Can we go back to the slide where it the first slide that talks about the approval process?
Yes.
That one. So I don't remember the very last line, sign modifications 11 to 30%. Yes, notification, no to a hearing. Can you clarify that? So you're saying that if someone wants to increase an existing sign up to 30%, they don't have to have any kind of hearing? That seems, I don't remember that part.
Yes, that is correct. That is what proposed. Maybe Denise can address that. I don't know that we had these exact standards for the Land Use and Economic Development Committee, or possibly we did and we did not address them. So that might be why you weren't aware they were in. But yes, the proposal is to allow 11 to 30% increase with notification, but no public hearing.
That seems like a lot. Can you tell me the rationale behind that?
So what we have right now, the way that the code is written right now, if you wanted to do an amendment to your sign program, or you wanted to do an amendment to your sign, you would come before the Planning Commission, you would have a public hearing, and you would hear all of this feedback. Unfortunately, it's essentially a ministerial action. So people will complain, people would come and they would complain, but the Planning Commission could only listen to them. They couldn't really take into account the feedback that they received, and it was, you could ask the property owner to change, but you couldn't compel them to change. And going forward, when you just have up to a 30% modification, we received an amazing amount of pushback from the business community, because to them it seems like a small change, but it required a public hearing. It required a public hearing that had to be noticed in front of the Planning Commission, and they found that to be they disagreed with that. They thought that that was different than what other communities were having. So what this attempts to do is to create an administrative process where we can get these signs reviewed and approved. They would still be noticed, so the public would have the right to know that the change was being made. It would just be, and we would accept the feedback, and we would attempt to negotiate a different sign, but at the end of the day, it would be whatever the code allows is what we would approve, much like what the Planning Commission does now.
But that 30% is our discretion? I mean, how did we get to 30%? Because what you're saying is that that's a small change, but to me that seems like a big change. 30% is a big difference.
I think excuse me, just address the 30%. So The Planning Commission now has authority up to 30%. So that's where the 30% criteria came from. Anything over 30% was a variance. So we just took the review and approval process that is currently at the Planning Commission and moved it over to the Planning Director and used the same percentage.
So what was the Planning Commission's authority to approve or disapprove the 30%?
So essentially, if you came into the counter and you had a 100 square foot sign and you wanted to increase that sign by 10%, so now you're looking at a 110 square foot sign, you couldn't do it right away. You had to wait. You have to submit an application. You have to wait 3 to 6 weeks before it could be prepared, before it could be advertised, before you could get in front of the Planning Commission. And then once you're in front of the Planning Commission, you went through a public hearing. And then after that public hearing, then you could submit your application for your permit. That's the existing framework that we're in now. What we receive and hear often is that that's too restrictive. All I want to do is increase it by 5 or 10 square feet. You're making me do this. You're not business friendly. And so what we were doing was to try and find a way to make the process more business friendly. And we thought that this would be acceptable. If it's the council's pleasure to have them go back for a 30% increase in their sign, that would be fine too. We would process that. We were looking for a way to address the feedback we received during the outreach portion of the exercise.
Okay. Yeah, that's when we get to the deliberation piece, that's definitely something I'd like to hear from the council, because we did not have a chance to discuss that in committee. So that's new to me. So I'm sure I have other questions, but I was on the committee, so I'll let my colleagues ask some questions at this time.
Any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber.
Thank you. I have quite a few. So it's my understanding from the slide that this has not gone back to the Land Use Economic Development Subcommittee since October of 2021.
I'm sorry, no, it went to them, and that was the first meeting. We had 2 meetings. The last meeting was February 16th, 2023.
Was that on the slide? I didn't see that, so
yes.
I apologize.
Yes, it was. Sorry, I put a slash between them. I should have put a and there. So
Okay. All right, so it has been to the subcommittee this year. That's good to know. Okay. So let me go through my questions. Starting with the monument signs on a corner property. Can you walk me through that? Because I don't really understand why we're doing that and what exactly we're doing. I know we're enlarging them. We're allowing 2 on, so go ahead and explain that to me because I don't get it.
So currently, in order to have if you are on a corner lot, in order to have 2 monument signs, you have to have at least a 2-acre minimum parcel, and you have to have a common name. And so what staff is proposing is to use the number of driveways. And so if you have if you're on a corner lot and you have a driveway into your center or your business on each of the streets, the thought was that it would be appropriate to put a monument sign on each side.
So if we were to, so I understand. So if somebody has a parcel is more than 2 acres, but it can be under 2 acres, right? But it would have to have 2 entrances and exits.
So we are recommending deletion of the requirement for 2 acres and the need to have a common name. So those would be removed from the code. And all that would be left in the code was that if you had a corner lot, you could have a monument sign on each street on your corner if it had a driveway into the center.
And is the thinking behind that because that's more user-friendly? Or why would we want 2 monument signs on every corner? hypothetically?
We receive a lot of feedback we have many multi-tenant centers, and we receive a lot of feedback about signage. And if you are approaching, let's take any of the shopping centers on Canaan Road. If you're coming in from Canaan, they constantly ask to have another monument, one on Canaan and one on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. The way that it's set up now, you could do that if you were a property owner that had 2 acres, but if you had a smaller center, you don't have that same ability to have 2 signs, and they found that to be unfair to them as a small business owner. And so listening to that feedback, we were looking for solutions to try and help the smaller businesses be competitive with the larger ones, and so that's why we recommended it.
And can you give me an example of a corner lot that has businesses on it that has 2 driveways that's under 2 acres?
If you look at Lake Lindero and Thousand Oaks Boulevard, there's the New York Pizza Place on one side of the road, and there's the smaller center on the other side of the road that used to have the Green Onion, Asian restaurants over there. If that development were to ever redevelop and attract businesses, they may want one on Lindero at the driveway there, and they may want one on Thousand Oaks Boulevard so that they could capture people from both sides.
And those signs would not need to be the same name? Would they need to look alike?
We would insist that the materials matched, but in some instances, we get people who want, if they have 2 major tenants in their center, each one of the major tenants want to be on the sign. Before, it would be able to advertise, say, the Meadows. You would get this center name, and then they would get the panels on the bottom, but the center name takes up real estate on the sign. So if you allow them to have a smaller plate that identified the sign, then you could have more than one tenant that had a bigger plate. So they find that to be easier to market those spaces, and they find it to be more business friendly. So that's why we're recommending it.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on. The other thing that I just want to make sure I understand is about the white bulbs. It's used periodically through. I love the idea of using the white bulbs, but then as I read further on, I'm not sure that what I'm picturing to be the white bulbs is what we're doing. So my thought is that, and I know we do this with the gas station, is that you can't have red and green numbers on it. You have to have white. Now, when you talk, do you need white bulbs in your externally illuminated, in your internally illuminated? All of that is white bulbs, right?
The white bulbs are on the gas station, and then also, let me look quickly, or is both. Okay. Yes, it is for both.
Okay, so then if you're using a white bulb, but at a gas station and perhaps these other signs around town, you can't put a white bulb behind a red letter, can you?
Yeah.
At a gas station?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
I thought that's at a gas station? I thought that was the whole purpose of what we went through.
The digital display has to be white lights. The internally illuminated sign. So if you have a sign on your, you can make your plexiglass any color you want. Under this amendment, the plexiglass wouldn't be able to have an illuminance, wouldn't be able to be overly bright, and because it would have to maintain 700 candulas per meter squared.
But it would be a white bulb, but it still can be a colored
plexiglass on the outside. But the lights on the pricing sign, light bulbs that are visible, those LED lights, those are white.
Okay. And so what about a digital sign in a shopping center? White lights or any color they want? I mean, electronic signs is where we're headed.
Digital signs are not allowed, and that's not changing with this amendment.
Okay, so digital signs aren't allowed, except at a gas station. And at a gas station, it has to be white.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That was what we intended way back when. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, I think that's great that you have under the temporary sign regulations, no mylar or metallic balloons. And I'm just wondering why would we have, if it's a risky to a risky conflict with a power line and we're trying to avoid a fire, why would we allow any balloons? I'm not talking about when someone has a private birthday party. I'm talking about is signage.
I think it's the metallic nature of the balloon that causes the conflict when it hits the power line.
Do you know that for a fact, or that's just what, I mean?
Yes, that is, I'm not a scientist, but yes, that is my understanding. It's the interaction of the fact that it's mylar or metallic. That's the information we received from SCE, is that the metallic balloons and the mylar balloons are the ones that can cause the spark with the power lines.
Great.
We didn't add the regular balloons because people routinely use those balloons. They give them away to children. They do all kinds of things with the balloons, and we felt like that would be hard to get the business community to give up those balloons. But we did include the mylar and the metallic balloons.
Well, thank you for that. Let's see. Okay, when we're talking about illuminance, and in the staff report, it says on page 6, however, almost all lighting that meets the ground where the measurement would be taken at the property line is from parking lot lighting. And so it sounds to me that staff is not recommending a foot candle standard at the property line in the sign code. And again, I don't understand what you're doing there.
That's because we already regulate it elsewhere. You have to reduce your foot candles. You can't have light trespass at the property line. So we already have that in our code, and we're not taking it out.
And so, and the purpose of, and that's sufficient? You don't think that there's going to be an issue down the road?
No, we've been pretty successful at reducing. Valerie has been pretty successful at ensuring that you have no light trespass at the property line, and we've been holding that line without adding anything else. The 1-foot candle at the property line seems to be working, so that's what we want to keep.
Okay, and so that was also one of my questions is, now that we're in a world where there's ministerial approval, or not, can't even use the word approval, but review for major developments in the city, are you going to be able to, I'm guessing that lighting is an objective standard, but are we going to be able to hold tight with the signage? Like, who's going to review this?
Most of those developments, there are some that you could call them mixed use because they are proposing some non-residential, but for the most part, that's residential lighting. So residential lighting and how those light packs are affixed to the buildings are regulated differently. This was intended to regulate wall-mounted signs and signage in non-residential developments.
What about directional signs? Again, not in residential?
Well, directional signs we are asking to make the signs larger because they're easier to navigate. Most of the time, the directional signage are on property and they're not illuminated, and when they are, it's intended to just be for wayfinding on property. So we haven't really experienced any issues with wayfinding signs on properties. In fact, we have some property owners who have new business suites where I have to send code enforcement out because they put up their own hand-drawn signs, and it's problematic. So we aren't really experiencing issues with wayfinding signs, and that wasn't in the parameters that the previous council had asked us to take a look at. So it's not something that we were prepared to amend.
Okay, and so the new developments going into the city of Agoura Hills that are mostly residential, they can do whatever they want with their signage, right?
No, they have to have a sign program, and that sign program will get approved at the same time as their site plan comes in. We know what the site plan is going to look like. If they want to come in with a sign program, they would go through whatever the sign program provisions are, which is in front of the Planning Commission. No one has submitted that yet. We only have one application that's formally in, and they haven't even gotten past the completeness stage yet. So this is ministerial projects that don't go to the Planning Commission are all brand new. And so we don't have a process set up for the sign program. We would just use the existing process for sign programs.
And I guess where I'm still confused is what if it's mostly residential? They still need to go to the Planning Commission for their sign ordinance?
There's no other way to approve a sign program without going to the Planning Commission. So if they just wanted, if you approve these amendments and they want to live within these amendments for an administrative sign permit, they would be able to do that. But there's no special dispensation, if you will, for multifamily developments that want a sign program. We don't have special standards. They would have to follow the ones adopted.
They would have to follow this.
Require them to go forward to the Planning Commission.
Okay. I guess I'm still a little confused on that because, okay. So even if it's an all residential development, they still have to have a sign plan.
Multifamily residential developments are ministerial. They would be approved over the counter. If they wanted to, say, have a monument sign, they have 2 driveways and they want a monument sign. If they meet the criteria for administrative review for their monument signs, they would have an administrative review. If they exceed the criteria for a administrative review, then they would have to go to the Planning Commission because that's how our code is written.
Okay. So as long as they follow the sign ordinance, they don't need to get any approval?
They would get an approval because they have to come through the administrative process. You can't just build a sign in Agoura Hills without going through something. It's just not possible.
But it wouldn't go to the Planning Commission?
Not
Okay, got it. The luminance of 700 CDM2, how did we come up with the 700? I know that the foundation makes that recommendation, but it like that Verizon sign, which I thought looked pretty bright, was only in, what was that? It was like under 300.
It was under 300 because it was weighted, and they allowed you to take the dark space that has 0 candulas per meter squared and average it with the extra bright light, which is why we're recommending not using a weighted standard, because with a weighted standard, you would get that bright light. But with a not weighted standard, and where every part of the sign has to meet 700 candulas per meter square, you would have to reduce the luminance of both of those signs because they don't meet our standards.
And I think that's great, but I'm just looking at this on the Verizon sign. It says the red is 81, the white is 250. Am I reading that right?
Yes, that's how it's shown.
But we would allow 700?
We would allow 700, but that's a weighted standard. The only reason that comes out to 253.35 is because the whole entire back part is black and it has 0. So they take the area that has 0, they average it with the areas that have candulas, and then they give you the average. And because 0 averaged with something else is going to bring it down dramatically, that sign would meet, which is why we don't want to use the weighted standard. We want every part of the sign to
meet. The black part of it, these signs aren't in Agoura Hills, correct?
No, these are just commonly seen signs to give you a frame of reference. There are very few people that haven't seen a Verizon sign.
Right, but if it's not on the black, let's say the black wasn't there and it was just on stucco.
Then it would totally be too bright, because the only reason it's down that low is because they get to count the black, which is not illuminated.
Okay. And I think this was asked at the Planning Commission, I can't remember, but do we have any signs that exceed 700 in the city of Agoura Hills right now, or anything that's even close to that? The 700 seems like a lot, that's why I'm asking.
Well, we can call up Jackson, who's the lighting consultant. He can give you feedback on why the industry has chosen 700. The 700 is consistent with dark skies ordinances from what I'm told, and so that's part of the reason why, but he can speak to that. What I can tell you is we don't currently measure in candulas per meter squared, so I don't have a way of checking I don't know if there are any signs because that's not our standard currently. We're trying to get to a standard that's more scientific. Once we do that and we buy the $6,000 meter, we'll be able to point the light at all the signs in the city and tell you which ones are, but we don't have that ability right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I would like to ask him that when he comes on. Let's see here. White all the way to the center. The decrease in the landscaping so that somebody could increase the size of their sign. What if there's a tree right there? Is that included in the word landscaping, or is that excluded?
Trees are included, but that becomes part of the calculus. So if you were to come to me and you have a tree that's protected and you want to get rid of a protected tree to put in your sign, then you have more than just a sign permit that you need. You now need a tree permit, and if you want to remove a healthy tree in our city, you have to go through that process. If it's one tree, it can be done over the counter. If it's more than one tree, you have to go to the Planning Commission, and that involves a whole different type of review before that tree permit, before the sign permit could be approved.
And is that only for a protected tree, or would you be able to approve the 2 trees taken out so somebody can?
We could do that, but what I would be looking for in my review would be whether or not those trees are required, because we have required landscaping provisions. Right. So if you're taking out a required tree so that you can put in a sign, then you're going to need to put that required tree back someplace else on the property. And I have the ability to condition the sign permit to do that. Putting in your sign should not make the site substandard. So I would be looking, if you were supposed to put in X square footage of landscape and you're removing it for this tree, well, then you're going to, or for the sign, then you're going to need to somehow find more square footage. And it's up to me to say, yes, that's okay, or no, that's not. If we're in a situation where I disagree and I say no, they can appeal that decision to the Planning Commission, and then the Planning Commission can deliberate on it and make the determination.
Okay, because as you know, in our shopping centers, when they were first conditioned and built, they had tree canopy requirements.
I know.
And now they've cut down all their trees.
A lot of them have, and a lot of them have let them die. And we do have a program, we are working on a program when we get time to do condition compliance and to go back and take a look at projects. Right now, we're catching them as renovations occur. So if you come in for a renovation, we're looking at your conditions to try and ensure that you're consistent with what was approved originally. We're receiving a little bit of pushback on that, so you probably have heard or will hear about it, but that is the standard that we're using right now.
Okay. Now, if we were to move forward with the planning director approving up to 30% of, I assume, color, lighting, size, all those things of the sign, and somebody could appeal it, a resident, right?
That is correct, because it would be noticed, and so the only 2 criteria would be the sign height and size of the sign. Those are the only 2 criteria that they could ask for a modification from, and because it's noticed, somebody could appeal that to the Planning Commission.
And would that resident be charged a fee for appealing it?
Yes, it's a $1,000 charge.
And could a planning commissioner appeal it, or could a city council member appeal it?
Anyone with standing could appeal it.
Okay. Well, something we can all talk about is, expecting a resident to spend $1,000 to appeal a sign may be a little steep. But we can talk about that during deliberations. Let's see. Here's something that I didn't understand. I must have read this 15 times, and for some reason, it's just not. I don't understand the variants and modifications relating to uses amortized pursuant to this code. And where it says, however, the section which established a 7-year amortization period is no longer in the zoning code. Could you walk me through what that means?
Yes, I can.
I mean, it's something we're deleting out of the code, so I just need to kind of know what that is.
Okay, go ahead.
Years ago, 1985-ish, based on what I've seen in the old codes, when we incorporated, we did non-conforming use agreements with a bunch of businesses that were already existing in the city before we had a zoning ordinance. Those non-conforming use agreements or permits had amortization clauses in them, which would have required some of those signs, particularly the billboards, to disappear over time. There have been actions that have taken place. There's case law. There's a lot of reasons why, but those provisions somewhere along the way have been removed from the code, and she's trying to wrap that up and address why that is.
But we still have something in the code about billboards.
We have some yes, we do. There are provisions in there. They're very, very, compared to what they were in 1985, they're far less robust, but they do exist. There is language in the code right now.
And language so that if somebody modifies their billboard, that they would be required to take it down.
There are some modifications that are permissible, but you cannot expand the non-conforming use.
Okay. And that still holds tight.
Correct.
None of this and taking that language out is going to have any impact on the billboards.
No, we didn't take out the non-detrimental, or it's actually the billboards are considered detrimental non-conforming uses, and we didn't touch those provisions in the code.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Now, I saw in the ordinance flag. It's defined, and there's some rules about flags. That's a flag as we know it, right? That must be considered a sign?
Yes, will be no, there's no proposed changes to flags, and so those are generally American flags. That's typically what they're regulating.
Okay, but it's any flag that anybody wants to fly on their property, right? It'd be the same standard.
We can't regulate the content of the sign.
Right. But they would need to follow those rules, the flag rules.
Yeah, it's very, very, yeah, those rules.
Okay. Okay, going on in the staff report, or this is actually in the ordinance. It's under monument signs, and it says only one side of a double-faced back-to-back sign shall be included when calculating sign area. Sign area calculation shall not include architectural treatments or support structures. So I think I understand that what you're saying is that it's only one side of the sign that counts towards your calculation for size. But then it says, it doesn't include architectural treatments or support structures. So it's literally just the sign?
Yes, it is just a sign. So if there was an architectural feature like a ridge or something like that on the sign, that would not be considered part of the sign for calculating the square footage.
But is there a restriction on the size and the restrictions on the size of the structures?
Right, and the height.
And
so there's
okay. Got it. The other thing on directional signs is it looks like we've reduced it from 10 feet from the street property to 5 feet. And I know, and I understand why we're allowing the increase in size for even numbers, right? But why would we be moving it closer? Instead of 10 feet, we'd be moving it, have it 5 feet from the property line.
It was, my recollection, Valerie was helped me through this entire thing because she is the one that approves all the signs. Was simply to make them more visible. So if the purpose is to provide directions and direct you, and you need to be able to see them as you're coming down the street to know where to turn, and so the thought was it would be better to move them closer.
And again, so even if somebody's sign was completely visible from the street at 10 feet, now they'd be able to move it to 5 feet?
It's more the directional signs. So let's just say I went on to one of the BPOR sites, the business parks, and say the business that I'm looking for is Denise's Donuts or Denise's Cookies. Let's do cookies. It's Denise's Cookies, and I'm in the way back. So you get onto the site. I'm a small business owner. I'm not on any of their marquees. I'm not there. So you don't know where to find me. And we actually have a therapist that she's been putting up signs so that her clients can find where she is. It's intended to provide wayfinding ability for the people who are leasing space within the development so that you can find where they are.
And by doing that, by moving it from 10 feet to 5 feet closer to the street, you think that's going to?
Once you get on the site, you have a wayfinding sign sooner than before. But, I mean, that, right now, we have code enforcement cases where people are doing that. They're just putting their own signs up. You can go on to centers and you'll see they look like garage sale signs where people are pointing to it. So since that's a thing that we're experiencing as part of a code enforcement issue, and the business community feels the need to have them, we were trying to at least codify them so we had rules and they were in predictable places. So if the council disagrees and doesn't want to put them there, there's,
Okay.
we'll continue to enforce.
Signs at drive-through lane or window. And I know this was in here, and I think you just moved it to a different location. But can you explain to me what that all means? For a drive-through facility, in addition to the signs allowed by the section, 2 changeable copy signs with a maximum area of 30 square feet each, a maximum height of 7 feet, and oriented internally away from the street are permitted.
Those are like the menu boards, those type of signs.
Menu boards. And are we letting them be, by this change, are we having them be larger and taller than they already are?
No, they would remain the same size. We are not recommending any change to the size.
Okay, that one we'll come back to. In the actual ordinance, it's on page 25, it talks about a modification is any change to the terms or requirements of this article, which, if granted, would allow the following. And you list like 8 or 9, 8 of them, Roman numerals. You change them from letters to Roman numerals, which of course is fine. I'm just wondering if there's nothing in there about color or brightness.
That is correct. It's only related to standards, measurable standards, like distance, width, number of parking spaces, that sort of thing. And all of these listed under the modifications are existing in the current code.
So if somebody wants to make their sign brighter, that will now be measurable, correct? If we agree to get the little meter.
That it would. The only thing to keep in mind with using the 700 candela square is that would probably only be useful for really bright signs. So, for instance, if somebody were to come in and have like what was in the staff report of the Verizon sign, that while we could certainly measure that. Part of the approval and review process, staff will be asking the sign companies to provide that information up front of what the color temperatures are, what the candelas are, and then staff would, if needed, if they got a complaint, be able to check that with the meter.
Okay. And so just so I'm clear, so even though those aren't listed, brightness and color aren't listed as modifications, if I want to keep my sign exactly the same size, but I now want it to be brighter, what do I do?
So as long as it didn't exceed the 700, and so currently, if somebody came in and they wanted their sign to be brighter, I guess that would be mainly resulted from, I think a little bit the color temperature would impact the brightness if you have a low color temperature. But mainly, yes, brightness would be measured through the candelas. So if somebody came in and proposed a sign that had a candela they have a candela now of 50 and they came in and proposed a candela of 200, that would be allowed. There is no upper limit other than what, the 700.
If it exceeds 700, it wouldn't be approved at the administrative level.
Right. But they could go from 200 to 700.
Correct.
Okay. All right, I think you've answered all my questions. Just let me check my handwritten notes here. You know, the Kelvin on the internally illuminated signs, I guess I'd like to know why we're looking at 3,000 to 5,000. And I believe one of the, in the staff presentation, you said that Vaughn's is 5,000, the Vaughn's Shopping Center is 5,000, and the Ralph's Shopping Center is 3,500. And why would we want that? For them to be inconsistent around town.
The business owners themselves, to give the business owners flexibility on what their marketing strategy would be, one. Two, we surveyed to see what an acceptable range was in the city, and the community, the respondents, the business community and the residents seemed to feel that based on the color temperature exhibit that they looked at, that anything between 3 and 5 was acceptable. So since that's what the majority wanted, we recommended that too.
Okay. And is there any regulation, I didn't see anything in the ordinance about a sign light being on for 24 hours?
The current code requires that lights be off at 11:30.
Okay. I must have missed that. Okay, let's see. Okay, I think that's everything. So thank you so much, and thank you for being patient, all of you. I did go in and speak with staff, but that was like a month ago. So I had to go through everything all over again, and so it just brought up more questions. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Does any other council members have any questions?
Okay,
Councilmember Wolf.
Regarding Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber's comment about the balloons, I understand Mylar, but for other balloons, we just don't think it's enforceable, and we think it would be beneficial to keep it for the businesses in the city. Is that kind of the feeling?
That is the feeling, yes.
Okay. My other question is, when we approve this tonight, what's the enforcement mechanism look like? And what's the roadmap of buying? Are we going to be buying that machine that will be measuring the temperature?
We included that as a line item in our budget. You approved it in our budget, so we have the resources to purchase it. Once this ordinance, once you act on it, if it's your pleasure to approve it, then it would be approved. We'll bring it back for a second read, and then 30 days after the second read, it becomes effective. Somewhere between now and then, if you were to approve the sign code amendments, we would order the equipment and have it here so that we had it available when the ordinance became effective. Does that?
Yeah, that's very clear. But would we be testing it at different times? And I mean, you know, it would be after staff normal hours. So how would that work?
Well, it would read the light coming off. It would read the light coming off the bulb. And I don't want to speak for the lighting consultant, but my understanding is if we pointed the device at the light, it would read the light. It wouldn't matter.
It wouldn't
if it's
change.
light
Okay.
or dark. However, if need be, if we received complaints and need be, I guess we would have to try and find someone to stay after dark and catch the light and do it that way.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then another question I have is regarding kind of what's not included for the sign ordinance. And I know it's kind of like a new realm regarding like EV charging. How do we measure the light on those, and how does that interplay with the sign ordinance?
We don't measure the lights on those. The EV charging stations are regulated by state law, and state law says that the only discretion we have is through the electrical code. So I'm not allowed to apply any zoning ordinances or any other things. It's strictly health and safety. So if the unit that they select is allowed if the electrical can be consistent with our electrical code, then we have to approve it.
And so the state law supersedes the sign ordinance?
The state law supersedes my whole zoning ordinance. I'm not allowed to apply any of it.
Understood. Okay, thank you. I just wanted that clarification. That concludes kind of my questions. Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber had a few that were answered, so thank you.
Councilmember Lopez.
I have one more question. Can we go back to that Verizon sign? Just building on Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber's question. So you're saying that if the Verizon sign, if we adopt this and this Verizon sign came, we would not approve it?
No.
And what part of those numbers is over the 700? That's what I'm not understanding. Can you put on your mic?
Sorry, I have the. Okay.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. Let me clarify that. So the, the Verizon sign that you see UV4 would be approvable. The key is to look at each color and whether that color exceeds 700. And so the white on there, the candles on that white sign are shown at 250.
But I thought Ms. Thomas said we would not approve that sign under this ordinance.
No, we would be able to approve that sign under this ordinance. And perhaps the representative from Kimley Horn could do a better job at explaining how candelas work and how they are measured.
Yeah, if we can bring that.
Jackson, go ahead.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. To give a little bit of background on the luminance, and even why we chose that 700 candelas per meter squared was all the research that the United States Sign Council Foundation did on signs. And since their highest recommendation was an average weight of
Actually, we can't hear you very well. You are
to come with a little bit more conservative aspect of it, and we took the approach of maximizing any part of the sign to be at 700 candelas per meter squared. So to allow for the city to be a little bit business friendly and not shut down a bunch of signs already out there because they're really bright, we went with this standard. So signs like the Verizon sign, which is a very standard sign, would be accepted, but the sign like the Citizens Bank sign would be rejected because it's overly bright on a black background.
I'm sorry, can we stop you for a second? We barely can hear you, and you're not coming in very clear.
Oh no. Well, I only have one microphone.
No, you're still not coming in clear. I'm sorry.
Is that any better?
Yeah, it's got to be the connection. I don't know if you can call in on your phone instead of on the computer, but that might help.
Yeah, let me see if I can try to do that.
Okay, thank you. In the meantime, while we're waiting for him, do we have any other questions?
Okay, yeah. And so then my second question is, and again, sorry if we went through this, but again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. We buy our little zapper laser $6,000 miracle machine. We go around town. What do we do with the ones that we are reading over 700? Are they grandfathered in? Do they have X time to change it? What is the procedure if someone is outside of the 700?
The first thing we would do is see whether or not it was approved before or after this code went into effect. If it was approved before the code went into effect, it's existing non-conforming, we would let it exist until it didn't exist anymore. We would treat it like we do any other non-conforming use. If it was approved to have a certain candela, say it was approved to have 400 candelas, And that's what we approved, but they installed it, and somewhere along the way, it was installed at a higher candela. Say it was installed at 500 candelas. The lights, the new installed lights, we have a provision that requires a dimmer. We would have them dim the light down to whatever they were originally approved for. And it would be a code enforcement case until they did comply. If they became repeat offenders, then we have processes in our code enforcement toolbox that would allow them to be held as progressive enforcement. We would be able to do that. But with the equipment, we would be able to shoot the light, see whether or not the light was above or below what was acceptable. If it wasn't what we approved, you don't automatically get to, without telling anyone, go up to 700. You need to request that, so they would have to come back in and either dim the light down to what they were approved for or submit an application for what it is they installed. And that would be part of the code enforcement action.
So let me give you an example. I won't say the business name so that I don't get slaughtered as, slandered as unbusiness friendly. There's a recent business that opened up shop near the freeway. Its sign is very, very bright, very colorful. I believe the planning commissioner originally did not approve this sign, and they ended up appealing it and getting it approved because it's their logo. It's wildly bright. What would happen in this case? Did we approve it up to a certain lumen, or do we not have any authority over this because it's a branded logo? I guess what would that example look like?
The branding, they would be allowed to build or to install whatever was approved. If we could prove that we would have to first look and see whether or not they installed what they were approved for. If they were, the case is closed because there's no violation. If they installed something brighter than what they were approved for, we currently have standards. Valerie routinely negotiates with businesses to try and get them between a certain amount of lumens. What this amendment will do is give her more tools to ensure that they're in compliance, and she won't have to use charm to try and get them to comply. If it went through an approval process if it was appealed and it got approved at Planning Commission or City Council, we would just pull whatever the Planning Commission and City Council plans were, and we would take a look. If we knew which business it was, we could take a look and see if they're in violation.
Okay. Are we back with our consultant?
We do have him on. I'm going to try him again. Go ahead, Jackson.
Can you hear me now?
Not much better. Are you using your computer or a phone?
I have to use my cell phone. I think the microphone on my laptop went out. I apologize for that.
Yeah, that's better. You're much better. Maybe just not. I think sometimes when you either get too close to the mic or something, it kind of gargles a little bit. Go ahead though.
Okay, so I'll start from the top. Sorry about that, everybody. I just wanted to kind of give a little bit more in-depth information on how we got to that 700 candelas per meter squared. And feel free to chime in at any moment. A lot of our research was based off of all the research that the United States Sign Council Foundation has done on sign lighting, and using their maximum of an average weighted luminance level of 700 candelas per meter squared. We took that, and then we were asked to make it a little bit more conservative for Agoura Hills. So we took that and made that the max to allow signs that are overly bright to be not allowed in the city. But we wouldn't be hindering businesses such as Verizon, who has a very common sign that's in every city that you see. So in those two examples, we would be allowing the Verizon sign, but we wouldn't be allowing that Citizens Bank sign, and that would be the ultimate goal, is just not to allow those super, super bright signs in the city.
Okay. Any other clarification?
Yes, hello there. This is Mayor Pro Tem Elise Buckley Weber, and I don't know if you heard my question earlier tonight about how did you come up between 3,000 and 5,000 kelvins?
Oh, yes, I did hear that question. That's a great question. The biggest reason we gave a range on that is because though that's for an internally illuminated sign. And when you have internally illuminated signs, you have a light source, usually behind some type of plexiglass, plastic, or some type of material. If you have lower color temperatures behind certain materials of plexiglass, it can distort the light coming out of the sign. So we allow for a little bit wider of light just to offset that distortion from the plexiglass.
And do you know if in the city of Agoura Hills, have you driven around to see what kind of signs, like do we have signs that are exceeding 3,000 kelvins, or are you able to measure that or no?
We're not able to measure that. I'm pretty good about being able to tell the difference between color temperatures. But when it comes to signs, you usually have colored fonts on the signs. And the color will look green because the font is green in that situation.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Thank you.
we do have signs brighter than 3,000. Yes, the Meadows Center, the Vaughn Center
okay,
is greater than 3,000. And I believe the Ralph Center, if I'm not mistaken, is at like 3,500.
Right, that's right. That was in the staff report. Any others?
None that I know, but once we get the equipment, I'll be able to tell you. And I do apologize. I got it backwards. So apparently the Verizon sign is okay, but the exhibit was intended not to show that Verizon was not okay, but rather to show
that
Citizens Bank was not okay. And I apologize for that.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I've got a couple questions, or just one actually, on to the 30% number. You mentioned that the rationale for the 30% was because businesses come in and ask for a variance, but would you say 90% of the time is the variance somewhere around 10%, or?
I wouldn't say that it's 10%. So the way our code is written, if you're coming in for a change that's greater than 30%, it's considered a variance, and that's a non-starter. So anything 1% to 30% is in play. So right now, it doesn't matter if it's a 1% increase or if it's a 29% increase, you got to go to the Planning Commission.
So that's, I'm just asking you, trying to clarify, the majority of the time, the businesses, what would you, if you had to guess, an educated guess based on the people that have come before you, would you say the majority of deviations from the what they're allowed to have, is it 10%? Is it 15% or 20%?
Let me call a friend, hold on. We're going to go with less than 10%. That's what Valerie says, and she processes all of them.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot. Thank you very much. All right, that was my question, so I appreciate it. So now we're going to move into public comments. Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raised hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. The public hearing is open. I will now defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participants.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. Before I close the public hearing, do any council members have any further questions? Staff? No? Okay. There being no further questions, I will now close the public hearing. Before we move on to deliberations, does any council members have any further comments before we move to deliberations? All right, we'll now move on.
Sorry.
Whoop, go ahead.
I don't know if this is the right time, but since we have some fire specialists in the room, could we ask them their opinion of the balloons?
Sure. one will come forward on the podium.
Good evening. I'm Captain Mark Tyler with LA County Fire Department. So I don't have a scientific or we don't have a researched opinion on those balloons. I can only state that within the history of our fire department, my time on the fire department, they have been issues. They have in making contact with electric or power lines, started fires, particularly brush fires, seem to be the biggest concern, and it is a real hazard.
And regular balloons, have you ever had any issues with those?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mhm.
So now we'll move on to deliberations. I think I should start with actually Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber, because I think you have the most questions, and I think it'd be good to.
You sure about that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's any secret that this is something that we've been working on for years, and something that I've joked about at budget workshops, like, hey, how's that sign ordinance coming? There's a lot that I like about it, that I think it's really great. Things like already looking ahead to having, perhaps a council is going to want to have a dark skies ordinance, and already putting things in place that would comply with that. I think that's, that's visionary and good and all of that, so that this wouldn't have to be regurgitated again. That would be set for a dark skies ordinance. I think it's really good that the BUG is 0. So that there's, you can't get better than that. I love that. There's, I'm not quite sure. I'm a terrible researcher. I'm not sure why you would move the definitions of the sign ordinance out of the sign ordinance and put it into the definitions of the whole zoning, but I trust you guys. And if that's going to be easier for you, I don't have a problem with it. Talking about the Planning Commission, who, quite a few of their meetings are canceled, and I'm going to guess that that's going to be the future because so much is done ministerially. So I really don't have a problem with having a Planning Commission that needs to review increases in signs. I'm definitely supportive of if it's 10%, which 10% or less, that it just get done by the planning director, because that seems really insignificant. But I agree with Councilmember Klein-Lopez. When I saw 30%, I thought that's significant. That's a third of the sign size, and I think that I still believe that, not that anyone's here tonight, but that our residents want to be part of that process. If a sign is, we can't expect them to pay $1,000 and come in and appeal. We can't even expect, to be honest, and bravo to Councilmember Wolf that you noticed the EV lighting stations, the new lighting on those, because we can't expect our residents, they're busy and they're not looking at signs. And then all of a sudden one day they drive by and they're like, what the heck? Who put that up? And it's like, oh, that went up 6 months ago. You've missed your appeal date. So, I'm just not comfortable leaving that to, the residents, that, pushing that onto them, that decisions are being made of size, height, of 30% more, and that they don't get to be part of the process unless they're, driving around looking and seeing what's going on. So I would be, if you thought it was worthwhile, I would be open to increasing the Director of Planning's over-the-counter, approval to 15%. And then from then on, it needs to go to the Planning Commission. It needs to be noticed, and they generally don't. I know that the businesses don't like it, but it also isn't all that time consuming for the Planning Commission and for our residents. And this is one of those. When I look at this ordinance, this is one of those things. I want to be business friendly because we thrive on our local businesses, and we've always just, the smaller the business, we just love having those small businesses. At the same time, we're elected by our residents, and this is something that, I've run 3 times now, and a constant theme that I know Councilmember Klein-Lopez heard it, I'm sure Councilmember Wolf heard it, is that don't urbanize Agoura Hills. And so what does that mean? That means traffic, it means lighting, and it means signage, and lack of landscaping, parking lots that have no trees. That's what people are talking about. I would ask them, what exactly do you mean? That's the urbanization of the city of Agoura Hills. And in my opinion, to go and say, all right, now they can have a 700, and what's the language on that? The 700 measurement.
Candela.
Candela. If those aren't what the signs are in Agoura Hills, why would we possibly give the Verizon sign an extra 500 candela measurement? And you know, Verizon, I know it's not here, but let's say they would come in and they'd go, way to go, Agoura Hills. I'm going to double the size of my sign, double the color of the sign, the brightness, I guess that's a brightness. I'm going to brighten up my sign because they say I can. So I don't really see why we would be going up to 700. I don't know why we would be going above 350. We don't, unless we want really, really bright signs in Agoura Hills. I mean, that Verizon sign to me is bright enough, and that's 250. So I don't know why we would even be talking about going up to 700. And the same thing with the Calvins. I mean, I know the survey said, you know, and it's, you know, businesses, but I don't even know why we would want that much, you know, why we wouldn't want it to be more consistent. Like, why isn't the Ralph Center and the Vaughn Center, whatever the measurement is, why aren't they more consistent so that the city has a consistent look to it? Why do we want the shopping center over here to be bright and this shopping center over here to be more natural looking? I mean, we're trying to get some consistency, and you know, especially with all the development that's coming in. I think that we want to be really careful about how that Calvin measurement. And I know that when we redid the light fixtures on Agoura Road, we went down to either 2,000 or 2,500, and still heard from our residents, why did you know, that didn't help, it's still too bright. So I just don't know, you know, I'm okay with 3,000, I'm okay with 3,500, but I don't know why we would be going up to. My experience is if we say you can go up to 5,000, they're just going to go up to 5,000. Like, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they want a brighter, bigger, more noticeable sign? I can't figure out why somebody would, if you can do it and you don't even have to get permission, I mean, slight permission, but you're within the code, why wouldn't you do it? And so, you know, I think we want to be super, super careful and mindful about that, you know, as much as we see the city of Agoura Hills as being, you know, I mean, I used to say this all the time, oh, we're all built out. We're all built out except Agoura Road. Well, not so. It turns out we're going to be much more built out. We know it's coming. There's no doubt about it. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. And Agoura Road, which is going to be a village, I don't know what kind of village, but Agoura Village, is going to be just lit up, and big signs and monument signs. And so even like with the monument sign, I don't really have a problem that there would be 2 monument signs. But when you're talking, you know, like those 2 shopping centers that Ms. Thomas told us about, like, really? They need 2 monument signs? I mean, that's the tiniest little center. Both of those centers are tiny. I don't know why we would want all this signage. You know, I just, you know, that's my feelings. I think that, you know, it's our job, what would the saying being, like, the buck stops here? It's our job that, you know, when all of a sudden these signs come up and they're bright and they're bigger, and what are we going to say? We're going to just say, well, nobody came to the meeting. We didn't hear from the residents, but we have heard from the residents on this. We all have. We've all been told we want to maintain the small town feel of Agoura Hills. So those are, you know, I say smaller is better, and not so bright is better. And, you know, I'm not saying that we go around and start taking down signs or give anyone a hard time. If you have a sign up, you have a sign up. And it's a non-conforming use, but why would we possibly then say, but if you're coming in, you can go 3 times the size, 3 times as bright? That doesn't seem to make sense, not 3 times as big, but it doesn't seem to make sense to me. And so I would rather have it be smaller. And then with regards to the murals, I would not be instructing staff right now to come up with an overall mural plan for private property, and just, you know, let's get through this, and we can talk about murals and flags another day. And then let's see. Let me just make sure I've talked about everything. I'd go up to 15% for the director of planning. You know, and I want the planning commission to make those decisions about somebody taking out 2 trees to put up a bigger sign. I just think that, you know, these are people that we are, you know, we've appointed and that we trust. And, you know, there's going to be so little for them with all this ministerial stuff that, you know, I feel good about that would come to them, the removal of trees, even if they're non-protected trees. We saw that happen at the shopping centers. They all took down. Now they haven't met the canopy requirements. And, you know, so sometimes we intend for things to go well and they don't go that way. I like the white bulb on the gas station. I know that was an issue years ago, or at least to 2 of us in the city, it was an issue. And so, you know, I'm thrilled that that's now going to be codified in the ordinance, that the digital signs are going to be, you know, white bulbs. And I think that's all. Yeah, I think that's all that I have to say, unless I've missed something that you need me to give an opinion on, Mr. Mayor. I don't know.
I appreciate your comments. I think we'll move to the other council members, and then we'll come back if need be. Councilmember Sylvester.
Well, thank you for all your comments, Mayor Pro Tem, because that certainly helped me with my feelings. I completely agree that 30% is way too big. I would have said 10, but 15, I'm comfortable either with that too, because again, that can be quite a big difference. And I think that should be go to the Planning Commission, so I agree with you there. I'm glad that we're getting rid of the mylar and metallic balloons, because that has been, you know, a danger for a long time. And I think regular balloons, stores can use those just as well, and the schools I know use them too for their graduations, so I wouldn't want to be a Scrooge and say, no balloons, but regular ones. And I actually do agree with Mayor Pro Tem also about having that wider range from 3,500 to 5,000, because nowadays also, most people, when they're going somewhere, how do we find it? It's on our phone. We're not looking, you know, at the sign as we're driving past the road. We know where we're going because, you know, Waze tells us, or whatever map you're using. So I don't think the signs need to be that bright. I don't mind having the directional signs at 5 feet, because sometimes I know I drive into those big complexes and I'm trying to find a certain place, and it is confusing, so that I do understand. Again, what you said about the monument signs, it makes sense when it's on a large parcel, and there are 2 driveways which are very far apart, and like on Tio and Canaan. That makes sense, but if it's a little area, maybe that should be reconsidered. Let me see, what was the... The sad thing for me is that we're still going to have the grandfathered signs. You know, like we have the grandfathered billboards, and we can't get rid of them until they fall down. So that's why I think it's really important not to allow new signs to come in really bright, because I think you're right. I think everybody will go for the brightest sign they can to attract attention. And it's not that we aren't business friendly, because we certainly are, and we want to support our businesses as much as possible. But if they're all at the same level, then they all have equal exposure, rather than some people, you know, boosting them up higher. Again, I agree with the white bulbs. Let's see. And I also agree with you that we should discuss the murals and flags at a later date. The EV charging lights, we don't have that many, and that is something I know, like my husband's always looking for. So that, and they are not, actually not, the new ones are not that bright on Canaan. You thought they were? But, you know, and that is the future, and we want to encourage electric cars. So that one not so much, I'm not so worried about that. So I think that's all I have to say at this point. Thank you.
So on the Calvins and the 700,
Well, the Calvins, we're talking about going from 3,000 to 5,500, correct? So in the range. So if we kept the range, say, between, I mean, I don't know what is possible. Could we go between 3 and 4? Is that too much, or 3 and 3,500?
It's just something I think that we can discuss it.
But 5 is a little strong. I love the bug rating. I think that's great. And then, sorry, the other one you were saying.
Candela, the 700 Candela, I believe it was.
I would like to know what the maximum is now, because I have nothing to compare it to. So I'm just sort of guessing in the dark if I say, well, 700's fine, because I don't really know what it is.
Right.
So I would like a little more. I mean, if you can tell us what is the brightest one in the city, and we can all go and look at it, and you know, I need to visualize. It's very hard for me just to pull a number out of the air. I can't do that.
That's good comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Great, thank you, and I appreciate this robust discussion. I do think that signs are in the DNA of the city of Agoura Hills as part of why we are incorporated, so we are very sensitive about as we have a city founder here tonight who could attest to that, Councilmember Koenig. But I do think that the mural should be in a separate conversation. I forgot the term, but we should come up with a mural program to be developed. So I do suggest that. I mean, I agree with my fellow council members' comments regarding 30%. I do feel like that's too high of a threshold, and we should be giving some authority back to the Planning Commission. As a former Planning Commissioner, Planning Commission Chair, I do think that is absolutely should be they should have some discretion with that. This is just a point of contention regarding the balloons. I personally think they're a scourge on our environment all around, and I think they should be banned. But that's a personal opinion. I know that can't be enforced, but I just want to put that on the record. Regarding the monument signs, I completely understand for a larger shopping center, but the shopping centers like the Lake Lindero and Reyes Adobe, I feel that it's overboard, and I'm not sure how we differentiate between the two shopping centers, and I'm not sure how to really articulate how I feel about the two monument signs, but I mean, the best way is I agree with what my two fellow council members say, that I'd like to find a way to explore an alternative to that, and I can't quite articulate that, so maybe my fellow council members in deliberation can. Now, I think the other question that will be asked is regarding the Kelvins. 5,000 is too high. Everyone will go to 5,000. So how do we find a middle ground? And I'd like to hear more deliberation. And for the Candelas, I don't have a strong opinion. I'd like to hear from the rest of the council on that. So, Mr. Mayor, does that answer?
Yep. It does.
Okay.
It does for what I need to know.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you. Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to say I know that probably those of you sitting in the audience are probably like, what are you guys doing talking for 2 hours about signs? But it makes me happy because, as Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber said, we've been talking about this for years and years, and when the survey came out, I joked that we were going to be the only two taking the survey, and I'm sure we both did. But I do want to thank our staff for really, reaching out to residents and businesses and property owners to get their opinions on this survey, because I think it helps us with our path here tonight. So I just wanted to thank you for that base of information, and also, as we discussed, we talked about this a lot in committee. So to my fellow colleague, Councilmember Wolf, as well, it's not an easy topic. It's very scientific. It's scientific and subjective all at the same time. So it's not easy. But I will say that, like Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber said, maybe not more than, I think, 150 people took that survey, not all of them residents, but when anything changes on signs or lighting in this town, we all hear about it. When the gas station put in their red and green numbers, oh my, our emails blew up. And so, you know, very happy to have the standard white, clean look. There was like a neon sign or something that came up at one of the stores in those Lake Lindero shopping centers a couple years back. Heard about it like within seconds from the neighbors. We always hear about the billboards. There was one recently that extended up, and even though that's was put in on the county and we don't have a lot of say over it, again, emails all over the place saying, get that billboard back to the size it was, and we did, and so thank you for that. And then, like we were talking about, the lights on Agoura Road, it was called the runway of Agoura Hills, because it was so bright and right next to the open space. And so, you know, it is something that we hear about all the time. And I agree that, you know, people, they're not looking at our agendas. And even if they are, it's complicated. They can't go through a 150-page ordinance and see what's going on with the monument sign. So I agree that it really is too burdensome to ask our residents to be on the front end of this and you know, have to appeal, first of all, have the knowledge, and secondly, have the financial resources to appeal something. They really don't notice it until after, and I don't want it to be too late. So I think, you know, I hear consensus with the council members who've spoken so far that, you know, an increase in 30% is too big. I'm fine with 10%. If you feel that 15% is a better number, I'm fine with that too. But I just remember that in reading the survey, when the question was asked about the size of the signs, the vast majority said it was just right. So I don't want to, I think 30% increase is a lot, and I wouldn't want to veer into that range. You know, I think as our planning commissioners rightly said when they heard this, you know, it's a tough balance between, you know, being business friendly and making sure that our businesses are successful, and then, you know, dealing on the resident side with wanting dark skies and, you know, the lower non-urban look. And then, you know, one of our planning commissioners rightly brought up the wildlife crossing and all of the animals that we hope to be bringing, you know, closer in when that crossing is complete. So, you know, I, like my fellow council members so far, would like to err on the side of being conservative on the lighting side. When it comes to the Kelvins, I was very happy to see on the survey that we were on the warm side and not the cold side. I think that is very typical of our town. What I would like to see is, like, I'm fine with the range. I agree that a range is important for some flexibility, whether it's 3,000 to 4,000, 3,000 to 4,500. I don't know. But when it comes to the candelas and the lumens, I mean, I would ask to go conservative at this point, and then when we do have the equipment to actually measure the signs around town, to maybe do this survey of town. I mean, I would like to know what our average is. You know, what is the average of the Vons Center with the candelas? What is the you know, of our businesses? To really understand what that 700 number means. I mean, if we're already at the 700 number, and as our survey says people are okay with that, then 700. But if we're, you know, consistently in the 200-300s, then I agree going up to 700 is a change for us that we wouldn't want to go in that direction. So I'm not comfortable picking that number, and as Councilmember Sylvester said, until we have more knowledge about what we actually have in the city. So I would like to ask staff, you know, if we can somehow budgetarily fit in some analysis of existing stores and signs after we purchase that magic laser beam. I don't. I want to see it. I want to hold it when you get it. I feel very attached to it. Does that answer? Oh, and then I guess lastly, agree with my fellow council members about the murals and flags are a totally different. There's a lot of passionate discussion about those two things, and so I agree that needs to be a conversation on its own. And then my last statement is, if we think that the EV chargers are too bright, we need to talk to our state representatives. Yes. Because if I don't know if it's even a federal, like you were saying, it might even be federally regulated, but if it is state regulated, I think that's an important thing to bring to our representatives. So hopefully that gives enough information for you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you. So I think that I'm hearing kind of a consensus among the council members that, and actually I have the same opinion concerning the fact that we don't feel comfortable. There's quite a few of us that don't feel comfortable giving a number with the Calvins and also with the Candela without actually knowing what is being currently used in our city. And a lot of the signs, we don't know. We don't have the instrument to measure it as of yet. And so I think that seems to be a consensus that if we could get that measurement and have some type of a survey here in the city of Agoura, then we would feel more comfortable kind of voting on saying 4,000, or at least I guess I should just speak for myself first, and then I can speak for everybody else, that I would feel more comfortable than being able to vote whether it should be 4,000, 5,000, 3,000, based on what's currently being used in the city, and the same thing with the 700 Candela. So I feel like I need to have that information first before I can make an educated assumption and come up with a number on what I feel comfortable with. Just going with the standards, saying this would not violate the majority of signs out there, where we are kind of pushing the limit and not knowing whether everybody then will go up to the limit in order to meet that number. So currently I don't feel comfortable voting on a number, and I think the majority of the council members here tonight kind of said that from what I got. Go ahead.
Excuse me if I can interrupt for a second, because I have a question. Sure. If we don't have a Calvin number, do we presently have a Calvin number? And so we do, and what is that?
It's my understanding is that Valerie negotiates the number, and so she understands that the desire of the city council to reduce the brightness and the color temperature, and so she indicated to me that many times the requests are for 6,000 to 6,500 kelvins is a general request, and she then tries to negotiate down. She was the one, I believe, that negotiated the Ralph Center to 3,500.
So thank you for that. So my concern is waiting. And, all these new buildings are coming in, and, we're looking to Valerie to negotiate it. I mean, it seems to me that we want to make a decision tonight, one way or the other, and then, we can always amend that number. But I think not having it codified is risky. So I would support, picking a number between, like on the Calvins, somewhere, between 3,000 and 3,500, or 3,000 and 4,000, whatever we agree on. But to leave it up to, I don't know. I trust Valerie. I don't trust, like people that, just want to put up a sign. Like, what if the person says, no, Valerie, I'm not going to do that. I want it to be 6,000 Calvins. And it's like, if we have an ordinance, overall, I think having an ordinance is just so much more protective of our city. So I would not want to wait on that. I would want to see if we can come up with a number, and then when we get the luminar meter, and we want to go out and we want to check it, then maybe we just amend that part of the ordinance again and go through that, because I'm afraid the staff's done such a great job. You've come so far, and I just hate to leave it open-ended at this point now.
Mayor Pro Tem, I just wanted to be clear that the meter will only measure, it would not measure color temperature. And so.
You only measure brightness.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, okay.
So did you say 3,000 to 4,000 was what you recommended? Is that right?
I'm saying 3,000 to 3,500, but I'm open to going up to 4,000. So whatever the rest of you, I'd like to chat about that.
Sure, and are you?
I mean, we do have an idea on the Calvins. I mean, I think there's a good picture in there. You can actually see how it starts out very yellow and goes all the way to colder colors, to white to blue. And 5,000, in my opinion, is, pretty bright, bright white. And so, I would suggest, I don't remember what 4,000 is. What page is that, Penny?
Would it be possible to put that
there it
back
is.
up on the screen, that range?
And I see that 4,000 is quite a bit different than 5,000. So, right.
So I guess, Mayor Pro Tem, why don't we discuss some of the other items while if we're going to try to come to some resolution tonight. So you're comfortable with 3,000 to 4,000 on the Calvins. How about on the Candela, the 700 Candela?
I think that's way too bright. And I would, again, we won't know until we get the meter.
Right.
But I'd say, 3,500. If that Verizon sign is coming in at 250, that's significant. That's. I'm not saying it's too bright of a sign. I'm just saying that's a pretty bright sign. And so I would prefer to be at about 3,500, 350, I guess it is.
For the Candela? So you basically would want it in half from the 700?
Yes. Okay. I think the city attorney wants to.
Okay.
Tell me something.
Yep. not you specifically, Mayor Pro Tem Buckley-Weber. So if you actually look at the ordinance, there isn't a range in general. It's like each category has its own Kelvin. So I think a lot of the changes that are being discussed tonight, I think we need to actually go to the code section, and the council is going to have to direct us how you want to change it. That also goes for the 10%, 30%, because there's multiple sections in that director review section where you say 10, 30, and so right now it's not really clear to both myself and staff what changes you want to make. So we could either go literally pull it up, the ordinance, and go section by section, the ones that you want to change, or our other alternative recommendation would be to continue this item so that we don't miss anything, because I'm really concerned about this internal consistency issue and not creating an internal inconsistency.
I personally think that's a good idea to continue it. I wouldn't want to continue it too long, but I would defer to staff of how long they would need to, they've heard what we've said, so, they know what we're looking for, and then we can work on it and bring it back maybe in a month or so.
And also, if I may, so what we would do if you did not want to renotice it, we would reopen the public hearing and continue it to a date certain. If we do not do that, we would just continue it off calendar, and then we would renotice the whole thing again. So those are your two options in terms of continuing a public hearing.
It would be my feeling to continue it so that I know that it's on calendar for a date certain, and so I would defer to Ms. Thomas to tell us how long she would need.
It would depend on what I'm doing. I honestly don't know what it is I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like we need to go through the whole entire ordinance, and you guys should tell us what it is you want to do. To me, it's all arbitrary. I don't know whether it's $3,500 or $3,499. I don't know whether it's 10% on everything, it's 10% on some, 15. I don't know how to amend it, so I don't know how long I need. I know if you need me to go and do an analysis of all the lights in the city, then you're not going to be able to do that in one meeting or two, because, that would take time. But if you guys can all decide what numbers you want us to write, tell us what those are, then we'll just write those numbers and bring it back. That could be done quickly.
Okay, so back to the numbers, if that's what we're going to do. We don't want to waste Ms. Thomas's time if she doesn't have a good feel for what we want.
We can also send it back to committee.
That's what I was going to suggest, that exact idea. So I think that's a great idea if you guys are comfortable in the subcommittee.
But you're saying at that point, then we'd have to renotice it.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that sometimes it's hard to get a schedule down in terms of the subcommittee meeting, and so this is what often happens. You'll notice it, you'll continue it to a date certain. That date comes around and we're not ready, and then you have to continue it again. So it's just.
I don't think it's a big deal really to renotice it. I just, don't want it to drag out till, another year or two if we can help it. But I would move that we have deferred the matter back to the subcommittee.
I think
that
we're
they've
clear
gotten a good idea of how we all feel, and then they can go through it, sit down with Ms. Thomas, and if there's questions that you're uncertain about, you can talk to the city manager, and the city manager, without telling us what you've discussed, can come back and talk to us.
I think just the only point of clarification is when we go back to subcommittee, that's perfectly fine. Is there a consensus on the council that you want to see examples of, the different signs? Because I just want to clarify the timeline that we can get that accomplished in. So,
as a subcommittee member, I would like to see examples, of both the Kelvins and the lumens examples. Maybe our lighting specialist can give us, some samples. Because, the other thing is we can just say, 3,000 across the board. Everything that says 3,000 to 5,000, we can just say 3,000. But we don't know what that means. And we don't want to be overly strict with our businesses. So I think visual examples, both in the city and if possible, and, just like that Verizon sign was very helpful, that would be great. I think as subcommittee members, we absolutely understand where the council's from. I think that it's just extremely technical, and both on the scientific side, but also on the ordinance legal side. So I think we just need more time to go through line by line to talk it through.
I would support that.
That's great.
And, and preferably if the signs were in Agoura Hills, Westlake, Calabasas, that's something we can relate to a little more, but if they can't be, then that's all right as well.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to make a motion to basically send ordinance number 23-472 back to the Economic Development Land Use Subcommittee for further review. Do I have a motion? Go ahead.
I would add to that you're continuing this item off calendar and to be renoticed. Okay. I did want to just flag that if we go through the example option route, it may lengthen the period of time considerably, particularly if we don't already have examples where we have measurements of the candela or the CDMs. Like I don't know if that means we have to actually buy the meter first.
No, I don't. It doesn't need to be in Agoura Hills, but if we have lighting specialists, why can't they give us examples from anywhere, just showing the range of how this looks in real life?
Correct. I would just say we'd have to defer to the consultant to see if he has those samples. He or she has those samples ready.
To that point, I understand. I mean, having a picture in Agoura Hills would be helpful, but I don't think that's the end-all be-all. I mean, most of the lights, I'm sure there's stock images that say that this is this Kelvin. Possibly. I mean, it could be anywhere.
And it sounds like Valerie knows very well you know, the ranges of what we have here locally.
Valerie knows lumens. She doesn't know candelas. No one knows candelas because it's a new standard. She can look at old sign permits and figure out what.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to ask us to make that decision if even our experts don't have that information. So I think it has to go back to committee with a little more research.
All right, so I'll now call for a motion and a second.
Council Member Sylvester so
go ahead.
moves.
Oh, you already,
I think you already
I
read
already
it.
said it.
You already read it out,
Okay.
yes.
And
got it.
Mayor Pro
Go ahead.
Tem Buckley Weber seconds the motion and including the language that our city attorney has proposed as well.
Thank you. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you. Why don't we take a 9-minute break, come back at 8:30? Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start moving forward with our next subject here in just a second. Our next item is a discussion to waive full reading and introduce ordinance number 22-473, amending the Los Angeles County Fire Code, California Building Code, and Articles 3 and 8 of the Agoura Hills Municipal Code, and set a public hearing for September 13th, 2023. I will now defer to Building Official Lucas Quash for the staff presentation. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry. We good, Amber? Okay. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
Honorable council members. My name is Lucas Quach, and as the city building official, I'm here to present an ordinance adopting the 2023 Los Angeles County Fire Code. But before I get into my presentation, which would be short, I'd like to introduce our guests from the Los Angeles County Fire Department. You already met Captain Tyler. He's also accompanied by firefighting specialist Joshua Costello. Since Josh is the one that did a lot of work on the actual ordinance itself, I'm hoping they're here to help me answer some of your questions and also to correct any errors that I might have in my presentation. All right. So as some of you may remember, at the end of last year, the City Council adopted the 2022 California Building Standard Codes, and that included the California Fire Code. However, as part of the Los Angeles County Consolidated Fire District, the City of Agoura Hills is also obligated to adopt the 2023 Los Angeles County Fire Code so that the fire district can uniformly enforce the same fire code throughout the district. The Los Angeles County Fire Department provides firefighting and emergency medical services for the unincorporated parts of the county, as well as the 50-plus city that it has under contract, including the city of Agoura Hills. The adoption of the county fire code helps facilitate the county fire department in administering and enforcing rules and regulations based on the technical codes, which regulate fire access, fire protection equipment, site preparation, alteration, and use and occupancy of the buildings and structures. Now, although the county fire department would like to have uniformity in the code for all the city it serves, local jurisdictions are permitted to make amendment to the fire code with their adoption to meet the local needs. City staff is proposing an amendment to the county fire code provision to delete an exemption from the automatic fire sprinkler requirement for existing buildings when doing an addition of 50% or more, but less than 5,000 square feet when completed. Removing this 5,000 square feet threshold exception enables the city to require fire sprinkler protection for existing housing stock of smaller sizes when a major addition is proposed. Now, that sounds a little confusing, so I'll try to give an example. So let's say a homeowner has an existing 3,000 square foot house and would like to add 1,600 square feet to it, so making it a total of 4,600 square feet. Now, under the county code, that addition would be exempt from being required to install automatic fire sprinkler system because it's under 5,000 square feet. With our proposed amendment, that structure, that upsize, enlarged structure would be required to have fire sprinkler protection. So as there are similar provisions in both the building code and the fire code pertaining to automatic fire sprinkler requirements, City staff is also proposing to concurrently amend the associated provision in the building code so that both the building code and the fire code would be more aligned in uniformity. At this point, staff is respectfully recommends the City Council to waive full reading and introduce ordinance number 23473 and set a public hearing for the adoption of the ordinance for Wednesday, September 13, 2023. Staff, as well as guests from the fire department, are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any city council members have questions of staff? Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, Lucas. Can you repeat that example again?
So if, let's say your house is 3,000 square feet and you adding 1,600 square feet, so that is more than 50% of the existing size. And the county code has an exception that if you do more than 50%, but you're less than 5,000 square feet in total after the addition, you are exempt from having to install automatic fire sprinkler system to that house, that structure.
So what if it's a 2,000 square foot house and you're adding 1,100 square feet?
That would be exempt as well under the county code.
But what about with this, with what we're...
With amendment, so without that exception, it would be just if you're adding more than 50%, then you would be required to have fire sprinkler installed.
So if I have a 2,000 square foot house and I'm adding 1,100 square feet,
yes,
I would have to...
Correct. That would apply to you if we're going with the proposed amendment to remove the exception of the 5,000 square foot threshold.
So then I guess my question is this, and you know, maybe you've got experience with other cities, is this a burden on the homeowners and a disincentive for, you know, ADUs or, you know, or something like that? If it's just 50% and we're not talking about any type of maximum square footage, it seems like that might be a very burdensome requirement for a homeowner. Have you experienced that in other areas?
Well,
I mean, outside of Agoura Hills.
Well, different cities have actually different threshold. Maybe the county representative can speak for other county-related jurisdiction. But I know that where my previous employment, where I was previously employed, it's, I believe the threshold was 75% as opposed to 50%. Can you guys speak to that?
Mayor, council members, to answer your question, I wouldn't say that I'm sorry, Engineer Josh Costello with the Los Angeles County Fire Department. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily more burdensome. I shouldn't speak on that. I mean, that's a matter of personal finance for someone who is proposing an addition to their home. But the fire department, of course, from a firefighting standpoint, is in favor of sprinklers when we can get them. But in terms of other cities, most of our constituent cities by far do not have necessarily their own sprinkler ordinance, but some do. I couldn't speak to necessarily what their specific thresholds are, but this LA County ordinance provision in Chapter 9 is specific to the Malibu Santa Monica Mountain areas and the San Gabriel South Face areas. And it was developed back in the 90s, I believe, in response to a Blue Ribbon Commission recommendation. And over the years, it has had minor changes to upgrade it, to come into alignment better with the changing model codes and state code. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, so is this proposal in line with our neighbors? Or do our neighboring cities and areas have this change to your uniformity?
They don't necessarily. Now, the agreement typically between the cities and the County of Los Angeles Fire Department regarding local amendments that are more restrictive than the LA County Fire Code is that the burden to set those conditions in the review process rests with the city. And if it's an item that the fire department reviews the technical aspects thereof, such as fire sprinklers, then once the city sets the condition, the fire department will carry through with the technical review and inspection of that component. And now, the fire department will attempt to check for that local amendment as well, that's city set local amendment, just in case the city were to miss something. And then the fire department would need to consult to see if there was some reason why the city had granted a variance from their city code. But again, the agreement is that the city will set that, will have the responsibility of setting that condition when a certain property that meets that trigger in the city code is met, but did not meet the trigger in the county code. And Mr. Quash and the fire department have agreed that that would be the status quo moving forward as well.
So again, are there other cities nearby that, are we the first to do this, or is this a standard for our region? I guess that's what I'm not clear on.
Well, historically here in this city, from what I get from past and in our building codes, that has been the threshold with without the 5,000 square foot threshold. So in the previous code, in our building code, that's the case. So what we're doing is basically just trying to continue that that historic enforcement.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Excuse me, can you stay just, does anybody else have a question before I ask them? I want to specifically ask fire department, county about a question. Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Did the county fire ordinance, did the fire department push to try to have the buildings under 5,000 covered under it and not have this exemption?
No, we have not. This was not a request that we made. However, we're not opposed to it. We take a neutral stance on it.
Right. And you know, I'm asking you, I don't know if it's better to ask the building official, but the cost for a homeowner to put one of these systems in for around a 5,000 square foot home? I
would defer to the building official for that.
Well, I haven't done any contracting in a while, but it's been said to be about $5 to $10 a square foot for the installation, to retrofit fire sprinkler system in the existing building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you answered my question. Anybody else have any questions for him? Please here.
My question is not specific to the sprinklers. It's just that, was there anything else that's being amended but that you were not uncomfortable with, Mr. Quash, or?
There are a lot of amendments, and I think that's kind of, that particular sprinkler requirement came to my attention is because historically that's kind of how we've been enforcing it.
Okay.
And so I just want to make sure that the codes are aligned, because the way we have been doing it is we've been enforcing it from the building code and not amending the fire code.
Got it.
And with consultation with representative from the city attorney's office is whether, we might have some issue with that as far if, things escalate as far as who has jurisdiction. And so that's why the proposal is to align the code so that they speak the same language and have the same conditions.
Thank you.
Any other council members have questions?
Yes, this is a general question, and I know this is in here, but I just want to hear it for my confirmation. So any new home that's built would require sprinkler system if it's above a certain square footage, or?
No, new homes are, all new homes are required to have fire sprinklers, all new buildings.
So all occupancies. So and that would include, possible for Agoura Village, all of that as well?
Correct.
Okay, and then regarding, so there's a homeowner in Agoura Hills who has a 3,000 square foot house, and they're going to be adding 1,500 square feet, so they would meet the threshold. Could you walk me through just what the process would be for that homeowner to then, where they would be triggered, or how they would be notified? Or is the burden on them and their contractor to install the system?
Well, when they submit plans to building and safety, we would flag that as needing fire sprinkler, and we also would send them over to the fire department for that, to get a permit to install fire sprinkler in the new upsize house or structure.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilmember?
Yes, I have a couple. First of all, when you take the square footage of an existing home, do you include the garage in it?
Yes.
You do. And in new homes, do they need to have a sprinkler system in the garage?
Yeah.
Yes.
They do?
Yes.
Okay. And then with ADUs are a separate building on a property, correct?
Yes. ADU, as far as in relating to the fire sprinkler application, is slightly different because there are some state laws regarding that. And the general application is that if the existing house, the existing primary main residence is sprinkler, then the ADU, the new detached ADU would need to have sprinkler also. But if the existing does not, then the new detached ADU does not have to have sprinkler.
Okay, so they wouldn't be forced to do that. And then a JDU, which is attached to the house, would not be more than 50% of the house. So again,
Correct.
they wouldn't be forced to put in sprinklers.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have another question? Why is it that we're just looking at occupancies and not businesses, for instance? Is that might be better for the LA County Fire, but why is our businesses not required to implement the sprinklers if they also meet the threshold?
Well, if it's a commercial building, which has, well, it depends on how it's used, could be like a B occupancy, and if they do add more than 50%, then that would trigger them to have fire sprinkler installed.
Oh, so it's not just, okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Councilmember Lopez.
Just asking to clarify here again. So if a house is adding an ADU, it doesn't, and it doesn't have the sprinklers, it doesn't need to add the sprinklers in the ADU unless that ADU is over 50% of the...
No, this would not apply to the ADU because the ADU fire sprinkler requirement falls under the state ADU law.
So this does not include ADUs?
Correct.
The state law supersedes this. It's a specific statute dealing with ADUs that precludes the ability of local agencies to set certain requirements that would otherwise be default requirements by the code.
Okay. Okay, and then the same, to Councilmember Wolf's question, the same math applies for new commercial additions?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I, okay. Lucas, you were currently in our building code in Agoura Hills, do we require the sprinklers for somebody that's going to add additional 50% onto their home that if it's under 5,000 square feet?
Yes, in our building code right now, yes, it does.
For under 5,000 square feet?
Yes.
It is in the building code. All right, so like you said, you're just trying, basically you're trying to match up the building code with this fire code.
Well, we're trying to match the fire code with what we've been doing under the building code.
Okay, and you don't know whether any of the cities around us have this requirement?
No, I do not specifically know that that there's a specific requirement with adjacent city. I assume that because of the sensitivity with the Wolseley fire, so historically in our city, that was the reason why we escalated. But, I'm not sure specifically how that provision was got into the code.
Do you have any idea why the county decided not to, or put this exemption in the fire code of around under 5,000 square feet?
Maybe I mean, I have guess, I can surmise, but maybe our county representative can speak more to it.
My understanding of due to the research that I had conducted on the history of this local ordinance with the Los Angeles County Fire Department, was that it originally, in its original form of proposal, it was much more inclusive of structures, meaning many structures that are not currently included would have been required to provide sprinklers. And in order to make it more easily approved through a number of negotiations, it went through some iterations before it was passed. And that, again, took place, I believe, it was first passed in 97 or 99.
And it hasn't been revised since then?
There have been minor changes, but nothing. I mean, if you'd like, I can mention one that comes to mind. That being that in this recent edition, the 2023, we have moved from 200 square feet of we have moved from exempting 200 square foot Group U, which are like your miscellaneous type sheds, barns, and detached garages, to now excluding 1,000 square foot detached garage, barns, and garages, so that it's less of a burden. And because the system that is required by the standard for those types of occupancies really wouldn't do much to serve that occupancy, because the system that is required of those types of occupancies is meant for is meant to allow occupants 10 minutes to exit the occupancy, which really is not appropriate for those types of occupancies.
Okay, so I guess actually one thing that also I wanted to ask you about that you are the expert in is the installation of these commercial grade, basically, systems in a residential building. Is that something that the fire department believes will save lives in many cases if we vote to have this put into these structures?
Yes, so there are 3 different general systems or levels of system that are required, that can be required of a structure in terms of sprinklers. And those are a full 13 system, as it's referred to, which is your commercial system, your 13R system, which is for typically a multifamily residential unit, and then building, and then a 13D or dwelling system, which is typically for your 1 or 2 family dwelling. I wouldn't say that I'm the expert on our department in this. However, the statistics time and time again, as I understand it, have shown that that it does by far, it has resulted in far fewer deaths in 1 and 2 family dwellings, even though the system is only designed primarily to allow the occupants 10 minutes to get out rather than to save the entire structure. But in fact, many times it will put the fire out, keep it in check, and ultimately save the structure.
Okay, thank you. That helps. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No written public comments have been received. We do have 2 speaker cards. Mr. Jack Koenig, if you'd like to come up to the podium. I do have some distributions from him.
My name is Jack Koenig, and I live in Agoura Hills. Fire is expensive. It's expensive for the homeowner, it's expensive for the insurance company, it's expensive for the city, and it need not happen. It can be ordinance away. It should be an object of the city to have sprinkler systems in every dwelling. We're way ahead on our homes. We're spotty on our commercial. We should have it that every new permit is ordinance to put in a sprinkler system. If a commercial entity gets a permit for a roof or painting or anything, it should be a sprinkler system put in if it's not. That's the ordinance in Thousand Oaks. And they're gradually going to all of their entities having sprinkler systems. 97% of fires stay in the room if there's a sprinkler system. The ordinances should be for health and safety, and we can get rid of fire. And we also need an ordinance that if there is a fire and they rebuild, they must put in a sprinkler system. There's a restaurant on Agoura Road that has burned about 3 times and has no sprinkler system. Now, we have a child's center on Roadside Drive that does not have a sprinkler system. That's against, I think, state law. Someone should talk to them. Those children are at risk. That center used to be Ringo's Fruit, and when it was rebuilt, there was an ordinance in there for there to be a sprinkler system. There's a child care center by the post office, rebuilt at the same time, and it has a state-of-the-art sprinkler system that was mandated. How that one got away with it, I don't know, but the city should talk to them and talk to the owner, and he's at risk. Maybe he will put one in. Those children should be protected. But I'm emphasizing, I have just at my house put on an external sprinkler system. But again, fire can be ordinanced away. It should be ordinanced away. All permits should be conditioned to have sprinkler systems if anything is to be done to any commercial product. We're okay as far as home products. And this is ridiculous, this 5,000 square feet or 3,000. They burn. The square footage has nothing to do with fire burning something. Not relevant at all. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sabrina Yakovich.
Hello.
Hello.
Sabrina Yakovich with Wetline Wildfire Defense. Hello, Mayor and council members and Mayor Pro Tem. I think I've got 3 minutes. They handed you a little booklet. Jack is one of our clients and is always sending me information and has asked that I come here and just, I think, raise the awareness on something that's available now that was developed by a 20-plus year division fire chief who continually saw that after homes would be burned down, there'd be a swimming pool full of water that was never accessed because the firefighters are working quickly with limited resources to fight the fire at large. So he worked to develop the system. All the information's there. You can go to our website. But the main things I think I just want to mention, just so you have the information, it does not rely on the electrical grid, and it does not rely on the city water. It's automated with a heat sensor. There's also a 4-way redundant start. There's a remote phone app start option. All of the products that we use are all bio-friendly. The extinguishing agent that's mixed into our water has the same hazardous rating as water, which is 0. Every system is custom designed by the fire professionals, and they use fire science and fire history in the assessment and the custom design of everyone, depending on if there's slopes or hillsides or what the threats are for the fire. And the last thing I want to touch on for the sake of time is just our mission statement. The reason we really exist is so that people don't stay behind trying to save their home with their fire hose and put their lives at risk. We want them to just follow the evacuation protocols, get out of there, have a plan in place, and just have that sense that they took the steps to leave something behind fighting for them to give their home a fighting chance when they return. And that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We have no further speaker cards. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participants.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. Does any council member have any further questions? Councilmember Lopez.
Just one question, and you may or may not know the answer to this off the top of your head, but to former Mayor Jack Koenig's question, are there no state or county requirements in the fire code for childcare centers? Like, I understand if it's a daycare center in a house, but what about a commercial type childcare center?
To answer your question, and to begin, we do have a specialty unit that deals with schools and institutions. They're not present tonight, so I'll speak from somewhat of a generality, but if they are existing and non-conforming and they're not changing in occupancy, then they're likely grandfathered in. Now, the state agencies, well, I should say that the state statutes regarding licensed care facilities do limit and generally preclude local agencies from setting any requirements thereof that are in addition to or more restrictive than the state code. And so likely those subject instances that were presented are either grandfathered in or they are simply we cannot impose that upon them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other further questions?
Yeah, to former Mayor Koenig's point, if there is a fire rebuild, would they be required to have a sprinkler system put in their home?
If it's rebuilt, it would be considered new. So unless there's an exception by maybe the council, but there's no, under the code now, it would be considered new. So it would be required to have fire sprinkler.
So a rebuild would be required. If a new build would be required to have a sprinkler system?
Yes.
Okay. And has the city in the past, and this might be a question for City Manager Hamburger, have we done any outreach to businesses about fire sprinklers, or is that not in our purview? Or maybe could we target institutions or child care centers possibly to request, or is that not within the city's purview? And I understand if it's not. I'm curious if there has been any outreach.
I mean, in reference to sprinkler systems, maybe in the past, we've shared information, but probably not a full outreach, like going door to door type of approach. We can always share information, and I think as mentioned, there may be some restrictions on what we can enforce on certain businesses, but we gladly can share that information as much as possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
If that only part of the house burns down, so it's not a rebuild, it's just a remodel for a certain number of rooms, then they don't have to put the fire sprinklers in, correct?
Correct.
Any other questions? Everybody's good? All right. We'll now move on to deliberations. I'll start down with Councilmember Wolf, I guess.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate the city taking a proactive stance on this. I mean, we're erring on the side of caution. I think that's wonderful. We're going above and beyond what LA County is implementing. I would be interested in some kind of provision regarding fire damage. If there's any, I don't know if that's enforceable or if that's realistic, but if there's any fire damage in a home, then a sprinkler system might need to be installed, but I could see how that could be problematic. I also think it would be important to maybe reach out to some of our preschools to do maybe a brief, easy education campaign or just share information about what the options are. But otherwise, I really appreciate this report, and I will be supporting it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, and I also want to thank our county fire for being here tonight. I mean, in general, when you're here and you're supporting something, we trust you. You have done such amazing work in our communities, particularly in our mountain communities, and so your recommendations and your support of something means a lot to me, and I'm sure to all of us. It sounds like we're removing the discrepancies between the two codes, probably saving lives. My one concern would be that it would be a burden for the smaller homeowners that are putting additions on. But again, if what we're doing is really just lining up some codes, then that maybe is just a non-issue at this point. So, more than even the homes, or not more than homes, but I'm happy to hear that the commercial units are included in this, because I think that's where we've got a lot of vulnerabilities, particularly because things happen at night when people aren't around and they don't notice or they don't hear an alarm. And so this is something that, will help contain a fire that, otherwise might go unattended and cause bigger damage. So I want to thank you all, and I'm happy to support as well. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for coming tonight. I know it's been a late night, and we do really appreciate hearing from you. I don't have a lot to add other than I think having sprinklers in homes is a very positive thing, not only for the homeowner whose lives might be saved, but for the neighbors. Because for every house that has a sprinkler, you're probably going to help save your neighbor's house. And so I just don't see a downside. We've been enforcing this anyways. And I think a 5,000 square foot house, that's a pretty big house. So I'm glad to not to go along with the county on this one, and no offense. And it sounds like you would like us to have more sprinklers. And I think that when people are doing a more than a 50% remodel, you can just add it to the list of things that the city of Agoura Hills is requiring you to do. And it could save your life. So that's just, it's an easy one for me. So I support what you're doing, and thank you for catching it.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Well, I agree with all my fellow council members, and I'd also like to apologize for making you sit here so long through all our signage, but it's important to us as well. Anything that can save a life is worth doing, and when you say that it gives everybody 10 minutes to get out of a building and could potentially save the structure, that is very important, especially in the area that we live in, and what we've seen, the horrific fire that happened in Maui. I mean, I just can't begin to imagine what that must have been like to live through. So anything we can do to save a life, we should do. And obviously it's important to you. So we would like to support our fire department. So I can make the findings in favor. Thank you.
My thoughts are pretty similar to what my other council members already said. I think, for one thing, I understand that there's an additional cost, and it's a decent cost, but when you think about how expensive it is to rebuild or add an addition on, the additional cost of this still is not overly burdensome compared to the cost of the structure, especially if you're adding 50% onto your current square feet. So I think that it's reasonable, and it also does save lives. Where also the majority of our homes in Agoura Hills are in high fire severity zone, and so it makes sense that we're trying to be extra safe and create circumstances for our residents to have that safety. And so for all those reasons, I think that it's a good idea. Also to have it uniform with the rest of our building code, I think is great. And so I think the reason why I mention a lot of that is because we're not exactly the same as the rest of the county in our area. We are in a lot more high fire zone than the majority of the county. So I think that that's one of the reasons why, for me, that overrides the additional cost that it might cost a resident to have to put this in if they're going to expand 50% of their residents. So I definitely can make the findings and move forward. So with that, I will now call for a motion and a second to waive full reading and introduce ordinance number 23-473 and set a public hearing for September 13th, 2023. Do I have a motion and a second?
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber moves for approval.
Councilmember Wolf, second.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you. Our next item is a discussion to consider the adoption of resolution number 23-2044 to adopt the updated annual investment policy and delegate authority to the city treasurer to invest and reinvest city funds. I will now defer to Finance Manager Brenda Cho for the staff presentation.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, the city's investment policy is adopted annually for each fiscal year. On June 28th, the city had adopted an investment policy for the current fiscal year. However, staff is now recommending an updated investment policy to be adopted. The city currently only invests the reserves in the local agency investment fund, and staff is considering diversifying the city's portfolio to optimize funds utilizing the investment advisory services of Chandler Asset Management, a firm under contract with the city. And we also have Mia Coral from Chandler joining us tonight and will be available to answer any questions you may have. Staff and the Finance Subcommittee has reviewed the recommended new policy and the changes, which include increasing the authorized investment percentages by investment type to align with California Government State Code. And this will allow greater opportunity for flexibility in managing the city's funds. The other changes are clarifying languages to conform to state guidelines and to conform to the format recommended by Chandler Asset Management. Additionally, the Finance Subcommittee discussed socially responsible investing preferences by not investing in companies whose primary activity involves the extraction and production of fossil fuels. This aligns with the city's strategies to promote green initiative and to protect natural resources. So with management directive, investments can be restricted so that no funds are invested in companies within the fossil fuel industry. Staff respectfully recommends the City Council to authorize the city manager to sign the management directive to exclude companies involved in the fossil fuels from the city's investment portfolio and to adopt resolution number 23-2044, adopting the updated annual investment policy for fiscal year 2023-2024. Staff is available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Before we move to public comment, does any council member have questions on staff presentation? No. Okay. Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raised hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted. I'll defer to staff for any remote participants.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. Do any council members have any further questions before we move into deliberations? All right, we're ready for deliberations. I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber on this side.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's fantastic that we now have a socially responsible investment policy, and I thank the Finance Committee for doing that. I'm not sure how many of the surrounding cities are on board, but a lot of them, I think, will jump on board when they hear that Agoura Hills has done that. So congratulations, and I'm thrilled to go forward with this. Thank you.
Excellent. Councilmember Sylvester.
I second what Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber just said. There are so many different companies we can invest in. So if we are not involved in the fossil fuels, I'm very proud of our city, and I hope we're leaders in that field so I can continue forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Wolf.
Great. Thank you. I want to thank the finance team for working with us on this. And I'm going to comment on the divesting from fossil fuels in a minute, but this new investment strategy I think is prudent, and I think it's a smart strategy for the city going forward. So I'm glad that we took the initiative to implement this. And regarding the social responsibility, I'm very proud of this. We're literally putting our money where our mouth is regarding our climate action goals. And we can do small things within the city and that adds up, but this is how we're going to make the change. So I'm really proud of the city for hopefully tonight voting to take the stand to again put our money where our mouth is and be financially prudent while socially responsible, and we're showing that both of those things can be done. So appreciate my fellow council member Council Member Klein Lopez for working on this with me. Thank you.
Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank the finance staff because, for the past few years during COVID, we didn't have any breathing room to even consider an expanded investment policy because we were, so panicked over, just even trying to break even. And so thankfully, now that we're past the worst of those times, I really want to thank the staff for reaching out to Chandler and bringing in the finance committee to discuss our options. We need to be fiscally responsible with our taxpayer dollars. And I will say that we had a good conversation with the representatives from Chandler, but the thing that really sold me was Finance Director Trolson's long relationship with them. She's known them for decades, I believe, and that really gave me the confidence that this isn't just some new, or random company that's coming in to kind of mold our options. This is a real long-standing relationship that, for me, has real value to know that you've been working with them for so long. Regarding the ethical investing and the making sure we don't invest in fossil fuels, I want to give all the credit to Councilmember Wolf, who brought that up. He's being very modest, but he's the one that brought that up with Chandler. They, explained that in some of their, particularly their mutual funds and things like that, sometimes they can creep in there. But if we have that in our as a request, then they really take the extra time to make sure that everything that we're touching is clear of that. So it was a good discussion, and I just want to thank you for bringing that up. With that, certainly, thank you, Brenda, for presenting, and I'm ready to proceed.
Awesome. Thank you. I think my thoughts on it, I, again, agree with all my council members that opined on this resolution. I think concerning the not investing in the fossil fuels, I think it goes right along with our climate action plan. I mean, so it's basically just another piece of the climate action plan and trying to discourage the fossil fuel usage, just like our vote to have 100% clean energy in our city. So I definitely can make the findings, and I'm ready to move forward. So I will now call for a motion and a second to authorize the city manager to sign a management directive to exclude companies involved in fossil fuels from the city's investment portfolio and adopt resolution number 23-2044, rescinding resolution number 23-2036. So I will now ask for a motion and a second.
I will make a motion.
And I'll second.
Can you say your...
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number...
No, just your name.
Oh, I apologize. That's why I got nervous. Councilmember Wolf, I will make a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Deborah Klein-Lopez.
Thank you. Now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from staff? Before I move into, how about comments from the city council? Go ahead. Councilmember Lopez.
I just want to thank the staff publicly for working overtime to the nth degree this weekend with hurricane/tropical storm Hillary. I know that a lot of our staff members were not only working on phones and computers and this and that, but were actually out in the city driving around, checking for floods, checking for downed trees, limbs, checking our C-Click Fix app, on social media, sending out messages about earthquakes and all these crazy things that happened. So just wanted to thank staff really for all of your time. It's very clear. I know you have your own families and homes and worries about your personal life, but that you clearly care so much about Agoura Hills. It means a lot to us and to our residents, so thank you.
Any other comments from council members?
I don't think so. The concert in the park has been rescheduled for this coming Sunday. It was interesting to have a rain day in the middle of the summer with the windows open. But the residents, you all stayed home. We appreciate that. We appreciate our staff being ready. There was never a doubt in my mind that they weren't, and all went well. So thank everybody for, being on the preparation bandwagon.
I'll just echo that. I was so impressed with the preparedness and the diligence the city showed throughout the whole event, and it's kind of a test run for I'm sure many disasters we will have in the future. So thank you to the entire city team for being so prepared.
You got it. Thank you.
And I would just like to add one more thing, because
Yes.
I agree with everything everybody said, so thank you so much. But also, if you haven't signed up for the LA Quake Alert or the Shake Alert, please do so. I mean, it was fantastic. About 15 seconds before that quake hit us, I had an alert on my phone. And it's amazing psychologically, if you know it's coming, you're much calmer, and then you sit there and you think, okay, I know what this is, and everything's going to be fine. So I would encourage everyone to sign up for that. Thank you.
And I know, unfortunately, I have to end the meeting on a sad note a little bit, and I know others may want to talk about it as well. But I know that this last couple of weeks we lost the Agoura Hills High School principal, Stephanie McClay, to cancer, and so I'm definitely saddened on that. And I'd like to try to end the meeting tonight in her memory whenever I do end the meeting. But I just thought, does anybody else would like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to read something, if that's okay, and then I'm sure other council members will want to chime in.
Sure.
So thank you for that. So I just want to say that, Steph McClay became principal right about when I got elected, and I had 2 kids in high school, so she graduated 2 of my 3 kids. So I just want to say a few words. And I think in general, being a principal of a high school has to be one of the hardest jobs on earth, because you have to be tough, but you have to be soft, and you see potential in every single youth, particularly those facing uphill battles, which these days are plentiful. And you have to do that with a stretched budget and more challenges from all angles, ready for any emergency, while all balancing the needs of not just the students, but the teachers and the families. And you're celebrating the highest life cycle moments when a child graduates high school, and oftentimes some of the lowest moments with teenagers in their challenging times. And Steph McClay was able to do all of this and more. When you think about it, she started up in 2018, and in her first year, she had to deal with the Woolsey fire coming right to the edge of, burned actually part of Agoura High School. She shepherded the kids and the families through COVID, which, that's for the high schoolers, that was just the most heartbreaking times for them to be, ripped of this life cycle moment. And she was there for them, and she did everything she could to make their experience meaningful. She was always smiling. She never lost her cool. She was always accessible. And, we were so sad when we found out she was fighting leukemia. And I have to tell you that when you think of someone in their mid-50s, you just think, oh, they'll beat it. It never occurs to you that it would end this way. So I'm so heartbroken. I don't have the words to even describe it. But what I want to do is I do want to just read this little bit of a biography so everybody knows a little bit about her background. And then I'm sure other council members will want to say something, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that I'm personally just so devastated that someone so special in our community is gone. Stephanie McClay, and we all know her as Steph, she's Steph. Agoura High School principal, was raised in Drexel Hill where she began her love of sports. She played basketball, field hockey, and lacrosse at Upper Darby High School. This is where her foundation of being a team player began. She continued her love of lacrosse at Millersville University, where she held school records for her outstanding play while earning her degree in special education. She started her career in education as a special ed teacher at Dover Area High School in Pennsylvania, developing an early dedication to student achievement and adopting creative uses for technology in the classroom before moving to Los Angeles in 1992 to work as an instructional technology applications facilitator for LAUSD. She furthered her education, earning a master's and a doctorate in educational administration from Cal State Northridge. She made the transition to being a principal starting at Cal Burke High School in Panorama City, managing all aspects of the high school's opening, and later moved to the USC School of Education to open the hybrid high school and facilitate its year-round hybrid learning model in downtown Los Angeles. She returned to the San Fernando Valley in 2013 as principal of Portola Middle School and their highly gifted Magna School in Woodland Hills, and served as a director in local District Northwest, where she supervised 17 principals. And as we know, in 2018, she joined our community as the new principal of Agoura High School. She raised her 2 children with her partner of 19 years, Kathy Martin, and for the last 6 years, she has been in a committed relationship with Ashley Cornelius, who supported her with love throughout her illness. Stephanie was, Steph, it says Stephanie, but she's Steph, was an award-winning educator and mentor to her colleagues. She was known for her supportive leadership and kindness towards teachers, students, and kittens alike. She enjoyed golf, cooking, and loved Eagles football. Steph and her partner Ashley fostered dozens of kittens, most of which her family, friends, students, and teachers enjoyed. Steph was a wonderful addition to our community, and she will be dearly missed. And there was a service last Saturday, and I love that her family asked for everyone not to wear black, but to wear bright, bright colors to celebrate her life. So to the family of Steph, we send our deepest, deepest condolences, and it's a loss that we feel deeply. So thank you for letting me read that, and I'm sure others may want to say something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, that was lovely. Thank you. I only met Steph a couple of times when she first came to Agoura High, but I found this thing after meeting with her and she telling me how much she wanted to get involved with the community. She wanted to work with the council, and she wanted to put on community events, and she felt like we were all one and together, and it was very uplifting. And then she says to me, we were in her office, and she says, "Let me give you something." And she hands me this. Now, I didn't tell her I didn't know what it was, but I was super impressed that it's something that's kind of high tech for me, and it's like a little, you charge this up, it's a little battery that you can carry with you. And I remember walking out of her office just going, wow, that's pretty impressive. A woman principal who's obviously knowledgeable about high tech. And I have this thing all the time, and I always think of her every time I look at it. And I thought she was a really impressive woman, and I wish I would have gotten to know her better, but I send my deepest condolences to her family and her friends and her partner. And just, I could just cry for them because I know how much it must hurt to lose what I would consider a young woman. So, and someone that's so deeply loved. So thank you for sharing her life with us, Councilmember Lopez. I appreciate it.
Thank you to Deborah for that lovely reading. I met her as I was heading out the door, and she was coming in, so my children didn't have her. But I know how much she was appreciated by the whole community in Agoura, and we are a small community. So I think everybody has felt the loss, and just my deepest condolences to all her family, and especially her children. To lose somebody at such a young age is tragic. So I'm glad we're adjourning in her memory tonight. Thank you.
As a former Agoura High Charger, it's really sad to lose one of our own. And I first met Steph in 2018 at the Agoura High, the annual MVP baseball game, where students with exceptional needs team up with the baseball team. And I remember being so impressed with her and her like kind of bigger, larger than life personality. I then worked with her every year on getting students to the creek cleanup, and she was super welcoming. And I lived by the high school, and so I would go on runs, and I'd see her all the time in a golf cart going around the campus. So we'd always wave and say hello, and she's had such a big personality and a big loss for the community. So sending lots of love to her family.
Thank you. And I think my interaction with Steph actually was on the city schools committee, and every time we met, she was always she was a hard charger. She was always excited, always animated, and a big advocate for Agoura High School, for the Chargers. So I mean, it was always fun to be in her presence and the energy that she exuded. So I really enjoyed the times that I talked on the with the city schools committee with her. So I enjoyed that period of time. So I appreciate the comments, and we'll move forward in memory, closing out the meeting today in memory of her. So the next regular city council meeting will be held at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, September 13th, 2023 in the council chambers of the Civic Center. It is anticipated that members of the public will have the opportunity to participate in person in the council chambers or by remote video conferencing. At this time, we will adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of the former Agoura High School principal, Steph McClay. Will the maker of the motion and the second to adjourn please state your names?
This is Deborah Klein Lopez. I make a motion to adjourn tonight's memory adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of Steph McClay.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Sylvester seconds.
Thank you. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you very much. This meeting is now adjourned. Awesome.